All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ark Episode 19 podcast. This is a last-minute podcast that I am doing because I want to laugh at the Q&A. I think that what they're doing is insane. They had an outrageous podcast, you could say, show before the US election, and I thought it was kind of insane because we saw a situation where they were bad-mouthing Trump before the election. They had no opposing voices, and it was like, well, where's the voice of opposition? Well, tonight they are actually doing a show talking about the misinformation bill. They're talking about why we need censorship. You know, should Kevin Rudd step down as the US ambassador? Should we see a situation like how do we manage Trump in a Trump with Trump in office? So to help me get through this particular topic, I've got a familiar face, Shakeel Latimer, who has jumped in last minute. Thank you, Shakeel, for joining me as always.
The question is, are we still going to be friends afterwards? Because I don't think anybody could convince me to watch the ABC. But I'm taking one for the team just for you, Joel.
Mate, honestly, the content for this show, it writes itself when it's the ABC happening. They, as usual, you know, in the past, they've started with their welcome to country, and it's just been, you know, a piece of crap. The whole thing, the way the show's been done, the way they don't represent both sides. And I think that's why it's so, you know, it has a bit of a gag reflex with people like you and I that actually enjoy having discussion, having, you know, the best ideas debated out. But there's none of that. And I think that, you know, the art of debate, we're losing it. And Q&A used to be quite a good show, maybe 10, 15 years ago. But yeah, that was back when it was a bit more balanced and the audience wasn't as stacked.
Even Media Watch. Media Watch was a great show that used to keep an eye on media when they step out of line. And that's become just very, what would you say, politicised now. You know, the ABC, it is a resource for this country. They really need to get their act together, and stop pushing out this nonsense that nobody wants to watch.
It's nuts. Guys, if you're listening online, I want to engage with you guys. I want to see what your thoughts are. Go over to Rumble, click the link in the description, click the link in my bio. If you're on Instagram, click the link in my bio and you can watch this properly in landscape on Rumble, on YouTube. But if you comment on Rumble, I will be looking for you guys. It's one of the safe platforms we have, and I want to look at your comments. I want to bring them up. I want to read them. The show is starting in about a minute from the ABC's Q&A. As I said, they've got an interesting lineup. They've got Zali Steggall. Zali is someone who is a Teal. She's a member of Inner Sydney. I think 60% of her seat voted no. And it's going to be a really interesting podcast that we go through in terms of the panel. Sorry, I said Zali Steggall. It's not Zali Steggall. It's Zoe Daniel, but all these Teals, they all look the same. And I'm just going to say it like that, and I'm not going to apologise. Zoe Daniel, she was the first female elected to the federal seat of Goldstein. That's actually in inner city Melbourne. And prior to politics, Zoe spent 3 decades on the front line of news and current events in Australia and internationally as a 3-time foreign correspondent and former ABC News United States Bureau Chief. We've also got John Ronson, British journalist, author and filmmaker. We've got Tim Costello, brother of Peter Costello. He's at the Centre for Public Christianity, senior fellow and anti-gambling advocate. We've got this lovely looking lady called Charlotte Mortlock, broadcaster, advocate and Hilmer's Network founder. And she's also an anchor at Sky News, it says. And Claire Lehman, who I'm actually a big fan of. I've got some of Claire's work behind me, actually. Columnist and Quillette editor-in-chief. She's really good. I really like her. I think she's been really good talking against the universities and what's been going on there and the infection of wokeness in the universities. And I'm here for it. I think this is going to be actually quite a good panel, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this panel dissects the Trump win, dissects the misinformation bill. A lot of people have been asking me for an update on where that's at. The vote it's not over until the 28th of November for the misinformation bill. So I'm very much interested in seeing how that goes. But any moment now, they will be starting. And I'm really interested. So how long has it been since you actually watched the last Q&A?
You know what, I'm not even sure. I mean, I don't watch much of the ABC at all. I think the last few things I watched was the pre-election show, bits that you actually sent me.
Right.
Right. Because I just don't watch legacy media, and I'm certainly not going to waste my time in the ABC anymore.
Yeah.
So
By the way, guys, we've got 1,000 people listening live right now across the different platforms. We're on about 20 different platforms, like 4 on Facebook, 4 on YouTube, 4 on everywhere. The ABC's Q&A, sure, you've got a lot of people watching on TV, but they've only got 71 watching on YouTube. It's Shakeel. Shakeel's new to this. He's sort of seeing, how big the sort of social media thing is compared to legacy media. I love giving it the stats to sort of conceptualize how small and fragile they've become, But yeah, it's
it was the last thing I ever expected was to be on a podcast. I've got no idea what I'm doing, but you tell me that people like seeing me, so I come on and share my opinions.
If you love Shakeel, if you want to see him back, please comment in here. I'm about to bring up Rumble. I want to see what you guys are saying because I want to actually read out some of your comments and go through the podcast. Can you comment to me, guys, when the last time you actually watched? You know what's funny? We've got just as many people watching just on one Rumble page as they do on their YouTube waiting right now, which is, I think it's insane. But if you're in the live chat in Rumble, tell me when was the last time you guys actually came on here?
But that really does say something, doesn't it? We're talking about legacy media in the United States as well. It really does show that they're so out of touch, right? Our politicians are out of touch. Who asked for the misinformation bill? Was there any public support for that? But they just did it anyway. So it just shows how out of touch all these people actually are. And was it you guys that said to me that the ABC have moved their headquarters? So this show, this Q&A, is that being done out in Parramatta?
No, look, they did set up a headquarters in Parramatta because they wanted to sort of make it a little bit more connected to the community and all of that. But now it's just making Parramatta more woke. No, look, they with the Q&A show, they sometimes host it in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria. They do move it around a bit, which I think is healthy, the Q&A show. But
do we know if this one's being?
I'm not sure, but they usually announce it at the start of it. So I'm actually very much looking forward to seeing where they're hosting this one. I would imagine this one's probably being held in Melbourne.
Yeah.
They are starting surprisingly late, but that's okay. A few people have been sending some comments. Guys, again, go to Rumble. If you're on the different platforms, click the link in my bio. I want to see your comments. One person said that they're already getting secondhand embarrassment watching the ABC, And it is a bit like that. Someone said, used my wrong account. Someone said the under-16s internet ban is insane. It includes YouTube and video games. May as well ban kids from watching movies too. It is astonishing, isn't it? The whole ban on kids,
Once again, it's not that I necessarily disagree with the sentiment.
Yeah.
But it's not his job.
Yeah.
It's parents' job. I mean, can you just get back to running the country? Or not running the country?
You're asking too much.
It's
How dare you, Shaq? What do you think you are, a taxpayer?
Exactly.
How dare you?
Yeah.
Demands of the government to do their job. Someone
Just leave it alone. Leave us alone.
I love that no one's got their names on here. I mean, that's smart. One person wrote, last time I watched the ABC was 5 years ago. What else is people writing? Absolutely, bring back Shakeel. Actually would like to listen to more of Stephen Shavura. Hasn't been on in a while. Stephen has a open invite to come anytime he wants. In fact, I was chatting to him today. Unfortunately, he's actually not going to be in the country for a little while. He's going to be in the US over the Christmas period. So I definitely want to get Stephen back. You know what I love about Stephen? He's the very first person that got me into Aussie politics back in 2018. And I worked very closely with him to build up his social media with tips on Instagram and everything to build up his following. The funniest thing was seeing this, because this guy's a professor. He teaches at Campion College. He's not a professor, he's a senior lecturer at Campion College. And he's wearing these singlets. I got him to wear these singlets after these workouts. And he's a historian, he's a Christian sort of teacher, and he's telling people about history and Australian democracy and our founding fathers, and he's in a singlet after a workout. I'm like, yes, this is like the rawness of stoicism. And I just love everything about Stephen. So anything I can do to get him out there to a larger audience, I can see why this person's saying bring back Stephen Shavura. He's built a cult following. I mean, very soon his following's going to be dwarfing my own. But I love Stephen. He's a good man. The disinformation bill is definitely connected to the digital ID bill and the age verification for under 16s. Absolutely. Whoop, it looks like the stream has just started, guys. I'm going to bring it up right now so you can see what's going on. They're just announcing... There we go. All the speakers. So here we go. This is going to be fun. Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. Keep your comments coming. We will go through them as we go.
I'm cringing already. It hasn't even started.
Oh dear, here we go. Well, they can visually watch us cringe as we go through this, so this is going to be great. They really got to change the song, don't they?
Hello, I'm Patricia Carvelis. I want to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation on whose land we're broadcasting from tonight here in Melbourne. You can live stream us around the country on iView and all the socials. Quandra is the hashtag. Please get involved. To get us started tonight, here's a question from Taralyn Camilleri.
Does our current political system enable or reward bad faith actors and thus reward narcissists?
John.
Yes. And in fact, I can back that up statistically. So the studies show that 1% of the general public is a psychopath. So there's how many people here? Like 200 people here tonight. So 2 of you are psychopaths.
Great confirmation, thank you.
And I think I've spotted which ones. But that figure rises to 4% of business leaders and political leaders. So you're 4 times more likely to have a psychopath at the top of the tree than at the bottom. And narcissism, I'd say, is probably similar figures. So why is that? I think it's partly internal, that if you have no loving kindness in your brain, all that's left is the desire to win. But it's also weirdly our fault. We have collectively decided as a society to reward people who have the worst mental disorders possible. The ones where there's no empathy, where there's grandiosity, where people are impulsive and irresponsible and superficially charming. Those are the people we're constantly pushing to the top of the tree.
What would you
Zoe,
prefer?
are we
Do we get
rewarding
the losers?
PK, I was just wondering if we could talk about me for a while. Look, maybe, but I think this place is full of people of all different stripes, and particularly since community independents have come into the frame, perhaps that's a reflection of people wanting something different from their politicians, and maybe that's a reflection of the kinds of people that were being elected and wanting to change that.
What have you achieved, darling? 2 years.
I think politics has always attracted people who are narcissistic, but I would disagree that it's always a bad thing. I think sometimes you do want leaders who have irrational self-belief. In times of crisis, you do want people to be able to push through conventional norms and be able to withstand a lot of social criticism. So I think it's not always a bad thing.
That's an
Go,
interesting
Claire. Love you,
perspective,
Claire.
Charlotte.
I think that there are lots of good politicians, and I actually think that we spend so much time talking about how awful they are, but then saying we need more good people to go into politics. And so I think that that is counterproductive. I do think that there are narcissists in politics, but there are also narcissists at the top of every other industry, as John mentioned. And with social media, as a society, we're becoming more narcissistic. We're so focused on ourselves, and even, you know, the use of words like personal brand. Like, what does that even mean? And why are we even supportive of that?
So what's your personal brand, Teal Costello?
Is the answer narcissist? Well, I have deliberately stayed out of politics for some of these reasons. I've had my temptations, and I say politics has always been my temptation, but not my vocation, not my calling.
But you've been tempted.
I have. I've been tempted. I've been very close a few times.
And you come from a political family, of course?
Apparently I do. And I actually think politics is a very high calling. I think the extraordinary good you can do is so important for the health of the nation and for flourishing. So I agree with Charlotte. I don't think we should be running politicians down. I do think that, and this is Claire's point, that it self-selects. You know, to actually put yourself up for acceptance or rejection, you have to have ego strength. You actually have to be able to cope with being knocked back, and most of us have self-doubt. We don't think our answers are right, and I think what's got worse is we've almost got masters of the universe with absolutely no self-doubt now.
Who would you be referring to?
I don't know any politicians or narcissists, PK, but the extraordinary explosion of being able to turn my grievances into your grievances, and I feel I'm your retribution. I think that level of narcissism is pretty scary.
Yeah. All right. Our next question comes from Penny Nicol.
Regarding the proposed misinformation and disinformation laws, who decides what's true and what is not?
Claire.
Well, this is why I oppose these laws, because I think the government has no place deciding what is true and what is not true. And, I mean, we can all agree that lies are bad, misinformation and disinformation is bad. You know, the internet and various platforms allow misinformation and disinformation to spread very quickly, and all of these things are bad. What's worse is putting the government in charge of what is true. Once we do that, we're basically living in a totalitarian state. So I think we just have to think a little bit more creatively about what we do about the problems with online platforms, rather than handing the power of deciding what is true and false to government bureaucrats.
Zoe?
Like and subscribe,
You
Quillette.
supported the bills.
That's her
with some
organisation.
changes.
Quillette, very good organisation.
And it's a complex area, there's no doubt about that. But at the moment, the arbiters of truth are Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, because there is no regulation. It's a self-regulated industry. And indeed, the platforms are already removing content and managing misinformation and disinformation. What the recent legislation seeks to do is to put some guardrails around that. So to say to the platforms, we want you to let us know how you're managing the areas where we think there could be a problem in regard to misinformation and disinformation, and to create some accountability. At the end of the day, they should be accountable for what's on their platforms, and they should be accountable to us, the people, not simply total control
the only place that voted for The Voice.
You know, and I just remind our audience that we've read through the misinformation
Zoe's got
bill.
a point, right? I mean,
there's
they
stuff
are
in there
ultimately
that
in
if
control,
you
they're on the
criticise the
platforms.
banks, for example,
yeah,
so it doesn't matter even if you're saying something which is true.
I mean, these
can still be
platforms
taken
don't
down.
want to decide what is true and false. They want, I mean, they've said this is too hard for us, and so there are a lot of lies spread online, but you know, as adults, as users of these platforms, we decide what is true and what isn't. I mean, I sort of get a bit, it's a bit tiresome when you can open up a newspaper or turn on a TV. I mean, there's all sorts of misinformation being spread all the time. Every truth claim is provisional. What we think is true today might be determined to be false tomorrow. So where do you draw the line?
John, is there no universal truth? I mean, there are certain things which are verifiable facts, are there not?
We can't let go of that some things are just true, evidentially
absolutely.
true.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I would say, going back to narcissism very briefly, another problem with having narcissists in charge is that narcissists don't really care very much about the truth. They care about themselves. People often wonder, why is there a rise of conspiracy theories? A lot of that is to do with narcissists in power, because narcissists want to be the smartest person in the room, and sometimes the way to do that is to come up with some counterintuitive information that nobody else has, which quite often is untrue information, like conspiracy theories and so on.
Like wokeism. Like wokeism.
There's lots of different
Men
ways
can be
to
women.
lie. Now, when the right lie, they tend to lie in these big, baroque, almost mythological ways, like QAnon and Pizzagate and all of that kind of stuff.
Who believes in QAnon here? No one believes in
cats and
QAnon.
dogs. That's a very good example. When the left lie, it's kind of more subtle. It's like it's lies by omission. It's
like
leaving
there's more
certain
than two
voices
genders.
out of the
Like
debate.
Russia stole the
It's like
2016
subtle
election.
biases. So people who are in charge of you know, deciding what is and isn't misinformation, I think can be prone to just thinking about the big lies that come from the right, and then they allow the little lies that come from the left.
The little lie, this freaking
How
dude.
do we police opinion? I mean, if you go onto Twitter, for example, most of what you see is opinion, and some of it is very inflammatory. People, you know, have very strong opinions.
Twitter, of course.
You know, how do we determine what is a truth claim and what is an opinion? I mean, it gets so complicated, and I just don't think bureaucrats will be up to the task.
I don't think they're going to be up to the task, and I think that is because they're narcissists, because social media, the giants, have not self-regulated an iota. And that is obviously everyone's ideal situation, that they do self-regulate, and they have no intention to, because they don't care. Because their engagement off conspiracy theories stories grows. And I do think that going back to how all of this started and talking about opinion, Trump has taken advantage of, I think, a media landscape that didn't do a good enough job of being the fourth estate and didn't do a good enough job of differentiating between opinion and fact. And he went right through the middle and said, fine, if you guys are going to be biased and not report on the truth, then... And that's how it's happened.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the point. You know, we cheer on the collapse of institutions for good reason. Institutions have let us down. They leave out the voices that we find unpalatable. Priests abuse children. There's all sorts of reasons.
So is that what's happening in the US? There's a cheering on of them.
Oh, absolutely.
He's an academic,
100%.
classic academic.
But what happens in the absence of institutions? We cheer on the collapse of institutions. When institutions collapse, narcissists thrive. So that's what's happening in the United States. I'll tell you one positive thing, though, in all of this.
It's the kind of person that would talk down to you.
Well, a positive thing, you know, in Elon Musk's otherwise monstrous reign, like I have very few positive things to say about Elon Musk, but he introduced this thing called community notes on X, and that seems to be really working. It's this idea that we, the people, can actually figure out what's true and what's not true. You know, when you see, like, all this AI stuff on Twitter these days, I refuse to say X, although I guess it's too late now, what you see underneath these pictures of AI is all these people go, well, that's just AI. You know, everybody was, like, scared that we would all get, like, confused by what was true and what's not true. But I think we're being quite good, actually, at readapting to this new world, and we're quite good at figuring out what's true and what's not true.
And the beauty of community notes is that it's not centralised, it's decentralised. So there's people all over the world checking each other's blind spots, and that's how we work out what is true and what is...
So, Tim Costello, it's all working, community notes will sort it out?
To call it X? It's a big dead name in the
Although I'm the last person to ask, I was on Facebook for a nanosecond, and when my 3 children all defriended me, I got off. I couldn't cope with the rejection, so I know...
Why would anyone defriend you?
Go ask them, exactly, PK. Look, I absolutely think all of us want courteous, civil conversations. We want to be safe. We do know there is a great difficulty in distinguishing a lie from opinion, and none of us are going to trust some self-appointed arbiter. But John's point about institutions is so important. You know, most of the institutions from last century that fragmenting, whether it's church or unions or political parties or military, and they've all perpetrated abuses. Actually, we need a framework, and we don't have one now, and it can't be Elon Musk.
Right. So, Zoe, returning to you...
Some people go online just in order to have an argument. Literally. Sometimes people go on just to sledge each other from behind their laptops, behind an anonymous name.
The arguments made by some of the others about the kind of system sorting it out, people sorting it out. Are you not convinced by that?
Look, it's not a takedown bill, it's a guardrails bill, and I think we need some, because at the moment we have none. And in effect, what it says to the platforms is, what are you doing to mitigate the risk of your algorithms spreading misinformation and disinformation?
Who defines that?
And we need to be aware of the consequences of misinformation and disinformation, and indeed the human rights of the people that affects. For example, the young Jewish man in Sydney who was falsely accused of the Bondi stabbings.
By the mainstream media who are exempt from the misinformation bill.
Who were affected by race riots based on misinformation and
they settled out of court. They did a retraction, they settled out of court. That was your recourse.
My final point, PK, is, as you know, I'm a former journalist.
Look,
I've seen
like
death and destruction
if they want to try and do
that has never made it into my news reports. It lives live in my brain and will until the day that I leave this earth. But it never reached any of our viewers because mainstream media practices a form of content management that is linked to social mores and norms and what we think that people will tolerate in our community. So to think that this is the first time that we're talking about media platforms having some control or responsibility to remove or manage harmful information is naive. This has always happened in one way or another.
We're going to keep this discussion going, and we've got a question from Wayne Pyle.
To prevent wealthy interest groups and individuals from buying political candidates and selling agendas, what is the argument against public money being used and capped equally across all candidates?
Well, we'll start with you, Zoe, because clearly this big bill has a lot to do with, will have a big impact on independence.
Yeah, so we need to get big money out of politics and we need to make some changes, and electoral reform is a good thing. So transparency, real-time disclosure, lowering the disclosure thresholds, all of those things I support. Forms of caps, maybe, but not if they entrench
big money
the
was
major
out of politics,
parties.
these Teals would never have won these
And the bill that the
seats.
government has put forward, which was given to the crossbench, I might add, on Friday or Saturday, and was tabled today, and we are debating it tomorrow after a 6-month drafting process, I believe will entrench the major parties. And it's funny to me that they've been trucking along happily together until they're under threat, and now suddenly they've made a deal, really the first time I've seen them cooperate on anything since I've been here, to put through legislation that entrenches their power. There is a cap on spending under this bill of $800,000 per candidate, but political parties would have a $90 million national cap. Now, they could advertise in marginal electorates like mine, saying vote Liberal or vote Labor, and that wouldn't be under the candidate's cap. And they have massive national brands that already give them an enormous advantage. More than 30% of Australians at the last election did not vote for one of the major parties. And unfortunately, this is a blatant attempt by those parties to cut those communities out of the frame.
That's right.
Wayne, what do you
this
make
goes
of
after the Teals, and this goes after all the minor right parties. This will actually wipe out all that 30% of people that aren't voting for Liberal or Labor.
Concerned that what I've seen in the last election, where $1 billion was spent on one presidential candidate. I think in Australia we're unique with a compulsory voting system.
She's still owed $20 million at the end of it.
I'm starting to see that the political debate and discussion in our community with all these mechanisms of social media has been watered down. And I think that's where independents have come in, that they're talking at a different voice. I just believe that if there's going to be money spent, that it should be equal across all candidates in each electorate, so that they all have an equal voice and can put up an equal argument and debate in their respective communities.
It's an interesting point you make, Wayne, because the government says that this is about getting big money out, and tonight Clive Palmer has spoken on ABC TV as well, talking about that. He's obviously challenging it in the High Court. Tim Costello, are the laws fair enough, or are you worried about the impact they'll have on new entrants into politics?
What does that mean?
Like
that anybody could run for politics and get an equal amount of money than the big guys? Is that what they're proposing?
We'll get into the detail after.
Absolutely support
I'll explain.
But if the taxpayer is going to subsidise that, and we are, the taxpayer has the right to say what Wayne just said, namely it should be equal for all the candidates. I am very worried that the structural problems in the major parties won't be addressed this way. And we know they have structural problems in engagement. So why did the Teals do so well? Pre-Teals, it was Cathy McGowan around her kitchen table, particularly with women in a community, saying we want to participate. That actually rejuvenated politics. It then became Teals. Involvement, participation, energy, new ideas. I think this stitch-up of the duopoly is actually killing that off. That part really worries me.
Charlotte, you're aligned with the Liberal Party. Is it a deal between the two big parties just to lock everyone out, a bit of a sort of let's just keep us here?
Well, I think it's important to note that Labor will be the biggest beneficiaries of this, and this is because they have the unions. There are, in New South Wales, I think about 20 unions that are directly affiliated with the ALP. So they will, by and large, be the biggest beneficiaries of this. However,
Unions
I just have to push back a little bit on the independent narrative, because, you know, the idea, I know that today they've come out saying that, you know, Labor and Liberal are the Coles and Woolworths. And I do think that in a political campaign, you always want to pitch yourself as the underdog, because Australians love backing an underdog. And I do think that the Teals consistently push a narrative that they are the David and the major parties are the Goliath. If you look back on the last election, the top 7 highest spending of electoral seats, the top 7 were all Teals. So that is money in politics.
Okay, but the question is...
It's true.
But you know, you want to know
this chick? I like her.
You want to know about an underdog,
Really increases
Pauline
public
Hanson.
funding
Oh yeah,
when
100%.
costs
and
of
what
living
the way
crisis
that she
claims
has
are
been
all good.
treated by this country.
I think it's a better
appalling.
alternative than having billionaires like Clive Palmer or Simon Holmes a court funneling money into independents who are campaigning on single issues. So when you're getting independents who campaign and make promises to their electorate that they can solve a particular issue, whether it's climate change or something else, it creates dysfunction in our parliament. The thing about the big parties, you might disagree with them, but they know how to govern, which means they know about compromise, they know about pragmatism. When you're getting token independents who are sort of can be populist, and I'm not just picking on the Teals, like Clive Palmer's Senator Babette is a populist. I mean, what do they actually add to our parliament?
Well, Zoe does not like this at all.
Have something to say about that.
UAP got like a massive amount of votes around the country. He represents a lot of people, you know, and they weren't buying what the majors were selling.
Any compromise or reasoned conversation between the two major parties for many years before I was in effect dragged kicking and screaming by my community to run.
She keeps talking about
because the crossbench had to create a bridge between those two combative entities where one says, I want to do something, and the other one says, nah. And there is zero collaboration between them. All they do is fight, roadblock, and we don't get progress on big issues. And that's why independents like me are there, because our communities got together and said enough is enough is enough. And they fundraised and they scraped up money and they got together volunteers and they put on T-shirts and they door knocked and they
targeted only blue ribbon Liberal areas and no Labor areas just by coincidence.
The last 3 years has been incredibly productive in terms of the way the independents have dealt with the government, and long may it last. Please, let's not go back to what it was before.
Okay.
I see your comments, guys. I'll read a bunch of them out when I get a chance. I just don't want to interrupt the stream.
About how much money was spent in some of the seats that, you know, including yours, where the seats were won. Do you accept that critique that you spent a lot more money than some of the other campaigns?
Yeah, because my seat was a safe Liberal seat since Federation, and I had to build a brand in 5.5 months to win an election against a juggernaut that is the Liberal Party. Now, if we level the playing field so we really all do have a fair crack at it, fine. But that's not what this bill does. And indeed, I'm now an incumbent, so I have an incumbency advantage. I have an office, I have staff, I have the money that comes with each vote that the government's trying to get through if this bill passes. But what about new entrants, new independents across the country where communities are mobilising? They will be totally nobbled by this legislation. So sure, get the big money out, but take the power of the major parties out too, because this playing field that they're creating is tilted in their favour.
Charlotte, on that, I just want to put to you...
She's not wrong. She's on the left, but she's not wrong.
Because you say, you know, the unions and Labor do pretty well. Well, why are the Liberals agreeing then? They must really be more worried about the Teals than they are about the Labor Party.
Well, I think in essence, like, everyone can agree in a common sense approach, I think, to a lot of the points Claire made, that trying to get money out of politics. We don't want Australia to follow in the United States' footsteps where we have these massive super PACs and, you know, you essentially have people like Elon Musk massively controlling it. So
I want to see Cardi B over here for the next Labor endorsement.
The idea of individuals
Shaq for the voice, Shakeel.
is very
Shakeel and Albo.
important. And that's just to Zoe, your point there. You said, you know, you only had a 5.5 months to build a campaign and you wanted, you know, to take the Liberal seat. But do you extend that same understanding to Senator Babette? Because do you support the way that they spent all of the money in your seat? Is that okay, someone like Clive Palmer spending the exact same, you know, or if not more for his candidates?
No, so as I've said, I think there is a case for forms of caps.
Oh,
so individual
I see. Now you've
caps
just
on someone
undermined
like
yourself,
Clive Palmer
and
being
an
able
Aussie
to put
audience
$100
sees through your
million
bull
for
crap.
example.
Oh my God!
Absolutely agree with that.
The problem is, Joel,
the
our
issue
audience,
is
your audience,
once
might
you
see
start
through it.
delving
The
into
ABC
how
audience
to
may
actually
not.
do this, where do you set the cap of how much people can donate? Where do you set the cap of how much people can spend? How do you create a level playing field between a total newcomer?
Can I translate what she's saying? We
thought
thought that this was just going to be an anti-Clive Palmer bill, but it's actually, they didn't need our votes to do that. They just partnered up with the Libs. So the Libs get what they want, kill off the Teals and One Nation and Bob Katter. And the left-wingers, they can try and kill off the Greens that are taking these inner-city seats. That's what this is.
Cost of living pressures, or set ambitious targets for Australia's climate future.
Tim.
I believe they've got to do both. I think the American election is proof that cost of living, even though the figures weren't too bad under Joe Biden, but people felt they were not better off than 4 years ago. That killer question from Trump, actually, I think was the reason, along with migration, immigrants, for the result. Look, I've got 5 grandchildren. I actually am very, very worried. I woke up after the American election feeling quite existentially in grief about drill, baby, drill, and what does that mean for my grandchildren.
I like Tim Costello so much, but I
don't
agree with him on this.
Palestinians. So there is this sense that there are bigger issues than just the cost of living. But the guardrails in a democracy, we now know, if you're going to have progress in climate change, you have to address cost of living. You have to have safe borders. You can't have the back door open, as we saw with the Democrats, and it killed them. There are things you have to do, but to set one off against the other, we have to address both.
Claire?
It's a very tricky problem for politicians. Even though we would like to have it all, we would like to have lower power prices and increased clean energy. It doesn't always work out that way, and the current government is experiencing this. You know, they promised that our power bills would be cut. They keep going up. So it's a huge problem for politicians.
Why would anybody in this country trust a promise from the Labor Party?
One thing that Australians should be mindful of is that even if we get our emissions to zero, our emissions are cancelled out by China within 15 days. So a year of our carbon emissions are about 500 million tonnes. China is emitting 11.5 billion tonnes a year. Now, all Western countries' emissions are declining. All Western countries are doing the right thing. The United States emissions have been in decline, same with Australia. China's keeps going up. They keep opening new coal power plants. So there's only so much we can do. So I sometimes get concerned that Australians are internalising this issue a little bit too much. It's not actually a problem we can solve on our own.
I really think that when it comes to these, I think it's a fantastic question, because I think that progress is a privilege. Like, we only get to make progress on things when people have their day-to-day under control, because otherwise they do not have the bandwidth to think long-term about the warm and fuzzy things that will make the world a better place. If they cannot put food on the table, they simply can't do that. And I think that we saw that in the United States, and I am very pro-renewables, and I really don't want, I want to save the planet. I don't want it to be on the back burner.
What do you think of nuclear power?
I am absolutely fine with having the conversation about nuclear. I think there is no reason...
The conversation is one thing, but the actual offer to do it.
I don't actually... I'm not an economist, so I don't know, because the question is about the economy, so I wouldn't be able to measure up the
she didn't say no.
Profit
She didn't say no. I just think she's trying to not answer it.
But I would say I would be very open to lifting the ban
controversial.
on nuclear. I know that, places like the UK have had, their own experiences with nuclear. All I want to say is that one of the only places that I can see in a policy space that can work in a cost of living crisis that is pro-renewables is home electrification. Because if people are incentivised to have solar and have batteries, they have instant gratification. Their next bill is lower. And that is the sort of thing that if you are trying to balance big, long-term, warm, fuzzy feeling things, but with practical measures in a cost of living crisis.
Zoe, your entire last campaign was really premised on a couple of things.
We haven't heard very much from our narcissist
that question was really about the trade-off of what people are focused on. How are you approaching it now?
Climate change is not a warm and fuzzy thing. Climate change is...
Freak out. Everyone freak out. It's going to blow up. The world's going to blow up. It's not a warm and fuzzy thing. Freak out. You know, no wonder kids are freaking out right now. Highest anxiety levels ever. Thank you, Zoe.
People like AOC telling young people not to have children.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zoe,
that we are facing
for freaking out
and how to deal
Gen
with
Z.
it. And also, cost of living and climate change are interconnected. One of the most underpinning elements of inflation, for example, is the cost of insurance. I don't know about everyone in the audience, but I almost fainted when I got my insurance bills this year. And that's because the insurance companies across the world are factoring in climate change. So we have to continue to address this as a long-term issue with renewable energy transition. And I absolutely agree that part of that, from a cost of living point of view, is household electrification, solar, batteries. This is low-hanging fruit. And shift industry onto gas initially as we transition out. And then households will start to see their bills come down if we can get them electrified. So all of these things do not exist separately, and we do have to be able to deal with them all at once.
Because of climate change. She said the insurance companies.
What a year it's been.
Oh, sorry, guys. Sorry for interrupting. This is hilarious. Because Shakil's a numbers guy. Shakil, you need to debunk that at some point. Make a note. Because that is really funny.
This is my industry.
I know. That's
with John Ronson, Charlotte Mortlock,
all right, let's go back
Tim
to it.
Costello and Claire Lehman. Next, we'll hear a question from we're up to Dylan Peters. Hello, Dylan.
I'll have to mention that next time I'm talking
Voice of London. Does Trump's engagement with these podcasters like Joe Rogan endorse the permissibility of these hypermasculine ideals? And in turn, what effect does this have on young men in Australia?
They love it.
Well, because it means we've obviously become anti-feminist fascists.
Courted Alex Jones in 2016, which seemed like a very counterintuitive and frankly terrible idea. It works out well for him, and Trump's done it again, courting people like Joe Rogan. I mean, the fact is, it's a strange time to be a man.
Is it? Why?
For you?
I mean, all sorts of reasons. A lot of the things that men, both privileged and unprivileged, have relied on all these years, certainties, have crumbled. Factory, for working class men, factory work, those Rust Belt towns are crumbling. And then, these sort of disenfranchised men then turned on the TV. And adverts on TV, everyone's watching,
I didn't realise that's what my face looked like.
Basically all portrayed as like doofuses who can't get anything right and have to be bailed out by their more capable wives. That's basically how men are treated in
that's the premise of The Simpsons, isn't it?
Well, yeah, sure. And it certainly grew up, as a result of The Simpsons and Married with Children. That's when you got a big renaissance there. It's a weird time, it's a weird time to be a man.
OK, it's a weird time to be a man. Just remind us who Alex Jones is, too, for those if people aren't necessarily in particular internet,
Look
how
him up.
everyone's in their own
Look him
algorithm.
up.
I'm not
Right.
He's actually right on everything.
Algorithms are here.
Right. Well, I was actually the first person ever to write about Alex Jones. When he
You're
was
the first
26,
person ever to write
into this
secret
Narciссist
club
in Northern California called Bohemian Grove, where we witnessed world leaders having a ritual that culminated in a papier-mâché effigy being thrown into a bonfire in front of a giant stone owl. Now, I know that sounds odd, but that is something that me and Alex...
Just a regular night.
Right. That was a great night of my life, believe me. Alex, at the time, was a kind of, local conspiracy theorist in Texas. However, he grew and grew and grew, and he's now the world's leading conspiracy theorist. Trump went on his show in 2016 and courted his audience who didn't vote, but voted for Trump. And then Alex started hounding the parents of children who were murdered in the Sandy Hook school shooting.
Come on.
So he became a much more nefarious figure. Because actually Alex is a narcissist, so he doesn't care.
But you were the first to write about him.
Well,
He was the first to write about
him. He was diagnosed by a...
Look,
by
the Sandy
somebody
Hook parents
having a
were
narcissistic
certainly
disorder.
traumatised.
So,
He needs to
that's not
apologise
me,
about this.
He has, and he
diagnosing
really
that
shouldn't have
actually
done
is a
that,
narcissist.
This is a stretch.
And now he's got $1 billion judgment against him by the parents of the children killed at Sandy Hook. And so his media empire...
Well, I thought it was a trillion.
I thought
it was a trillion.
Dylan, I want to bring you back in. You've asked this question about these kind of hyper-masculine ideals and the impact they have on men in Australia. What concerns you?
Well, I'm a high school teacher, so I guess what I'm beginning to see in my classroom is sort of the regurgitation of those statements without much forethought or knowledge by young men in particular.
Yeah.
If your kid goes to that school, rip him out. Rip him out right now.
Gravitating towards the likes of Andrew Tate and these kind of awful manosphere people. And that's because, I think to a great extent, it's because the tech billionaires, they want us all fighting with each other. They want identity politics down here. They want men hating women and women hating men, because that means people like Elon Musk just get richer and richer. The real problem in society right now is class. It's not identity. But it doesn't benefit our leaders for us to want to think that. So instead, they get us. It's bread and circuses. They want to get us all fighting down here.
Yeah. And is it working, Claire? Are we all just fighting? We're all in our little camps.
I think so, but there's really interesting data that's come out of the US election, and it doesn't neatly fit in with our identity politics narratives. For example, white males actually moved away from Donald Trump at the population level, and Hispanic and black male voters had a huge increase in their support for Trump. And, you know, why is that? There's lots of different reasons, but one reason is because
people that look
Hispanic
like us,
and black men are more traditionally masculine than, you know, white middle-class progressive men. And I think, you know, there's been an issue, they're more comfortable with notions of masculinity. That's what the survey data shows. I think there's, you know, we have demonized maleness. We have demonized traditional masculinity. And so when there is a vacuum, you get these people like Andrew Tate coming in and filling it.
Yeah.
Andrew Tate's bloody legend.
Can I just say, for
so
so many men,
that.
the
He's doing what the government
before
isn't doing.
masculinity is now toxic, and I think we know that our wives, our partners are smarter than us. They're earning more than us. There is this sense of a profound shift from our father's day, and there is profound insecurity. And speaking to teachers up on the Gold Coast, I remember a female teacher stood up. She said, "Look at me, I'm 5 foot tall. The Year 10 boys in my class terrify me, have me in tears. They are all watching Andrew Tate. I do not know what to do."
Yeah.
And then right around the room, other teachers started saying the same, particularly women. So there are toxic males, but it's not all males.
So what do you want to do?
And it
ban
is
them
interesting,
from social media. That's what you want to do.
The under-30s men, Joe Biden
Put
won
them all on estrogen.
them by 15 points. This year, under-30s men, Trump won by 14 points. So the flip for under-30s men is very, very dramatic. Something
because we're fed
is
up.
going on, and we have to address it.
Charlotte?
I was just going to say, Tim, you spoke to like that sense that women are, you know, doing all of these things. I think what has happened is that, and I spend my time talking about how women are systemically, you know, disadvantaged in politics. And I definitely... Women are still disadvantaged in a lot of systems.
So apparently, like, there's a disconnect going on here. So we're hearing, you know, men feel like women are earning more, and but then women aren't running the companies.
What it is, though, it's the cultural aspect. And at the moment, so I think in the systems, women still aren't earning the same. We're still not represented in Parliament in the same numbers. And what we are seeing, though, is that culturally women have become superior. And I do think that we see that in pop culture in a lot of different places. And I just think that as
Why is she wearing a Saudi
woman
jersey?
who is very vocal on women's issues, weighs heavily on me that you can be pro-women without being anti-men, and we do not need to demonise men. And I think there is something funny going on at the moment, and I think this goes to your point, where young men are being kind of infantilized as well by women, saying, this is the podcast you can listen to, this is the, you know, where And I don't think that's helpful. I really think that's counterproductive to what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. You keep referring to toxic masculinity. But I'm expecting.
Where is the guy on the panel that is just going rah rah rah? No.
Yeah, he's trying to find his tampons.
Rungs have male feet all over them is scant comfort for the rest of the men who are more and more disenfranchised.
Yeah, it's a really powerful point.
I think that's absolutely true. And the fact is, you know, to a large extent, it's just the way the world is going. When the agrarian age made way for the industrial and post-industrial ages, I think men were very good at persuading everybody.
I
the fact
really
that we were
dislike
very
this
good
guy.
In fields as farmers.
You know, you could just see he'd be talking to him and he'd just be.
But it clearly wasn't true. And the
suave.
fact is,
I don't
women
like it.
are
You just
better
know
at
when you shake his
sitting
hand, it's
still,
wet.
paying attention. The things that are important in offices now are values which are better suited for women.
You've all equally sat still, waited for your turn. I just won't accept that. Now we have a question from Oscar Edwards.
How will governments and other organisations engage with youth when the youth social media ban comes into effect?
Oh, Oscar, that is a good question.
Yep, that's right.
Oscar, I'd just love
Labour
to
and
hear
Liberal are voting
from you
for this,
about
by the
your
way,
use of
guys.
social media. Do you use it?
Yeah, I use. My dad made me wait until I was 13, which was the Meta instituted recommended age to get Instagram and to get Facebook. I use it a lot to connect with people who work in youth advocacy. I'm a member of the Victorian Student Representative Council. I've worked with the Department of Premier and Cabinet and Department of Education, all things that were advertised to you through social media.
So you're on social media legally by the current standard, and all the connections you've made have been through social media?
A lot of them, yes. A lot of the amazing networking opportunities that are available for people my age, we find about through social media. The days of people coming into school or signing up to emailing lists aren't there anymore.
Right. That's fascinating. And do you find it a sort of, well, I'm going to use the word that we've used before, do you find it a toxic place or is it a positive place? Perhaps both.
Social media
The way that I've put it before is social media is like a forest. It's a beautiful place with beautiful nature, but if you turn behind the wrong tree, there might be a bear waiting for you.
This kid, this freaking kid, isn't that just beautiful? That kid said the wisest thing all show.
That's also the case for adults, right, on social media. Claire, I want to bring you in because the question that Oscar has asked is a really important one. How exactly are those campaigns going to be run once social media is banned?
Well, I don't think that this law will actually be enforceable, and I think the government knows that. They just want to pass it to give parents a bit more authority around the kitchen table. I really don't think it's going to be enforceable, and perhaps you know, parents will have the discretion to allow, you know, young people like you to use social media. However, if they've got a daughter who's spending 9 hours a day on Instagram and she's, you know, developing a complex about how she looks, you know, that the legislation will give parents a bit more, you know, backing to get the children who are having problematic experiences off the platform.
With respect, Claire, you are inciting young people to breaking the law.
Yep.
You're actually inciting people. Well, so when this passes, if you said that after, you're inciting people to break the law, even though the parents give you consent, it's against the law.
You know, I bought some girly magazines when I was in year 7 from the year 11s, right? Obviously the internet existed, but not like it is now. You're never going to stop kids from accessing things if they want to see things. No. You're never going to do it.
No.
Why are they even trying?
That's why I'm excited, because it will pass. If you've got Labour and Liberal, it doesn't matter what we do with the minor parties. It only makes up 30% of the votes. It will pass. And the really interesting thing is, the fascinating thing, is going to be seeing how all the creative people in Gen Z work out a way around it. Because there are some brilliant minds there that they know how to code. Yeah. I don't know how to code. These kids, they know how to code. They know how to get around these things. They're going to come up with some really cool things that we're going to adopt as part of our movement. It's going to be, I'm actually very excited. It's going to unlock a whole new potential of talent. Sorry, I just discovered the space bar to pause, so let's get back to the show.
Right, so you think it'd be used as a tool?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't expect it actually to work?
I don't think it's going to be, I don't see how anyone's going to be able to enforce it.
Are you going to stay on it? Well, I'm asking you if you're going to break the law, because you're only
exactly
15, so no, you're not going to break the law.
I wouldn't break the law. Amazing.
You should say I'm going to break the law.
As young
Screw
people,
government.
we don't get opportunity to have a voice very often, and when we do, it's so rare. And social media is literally a platform to give people a voice, and to ban it for people under the age of 16, it's taking away a part of their voice.
Well, why is this staying the whole show?
Here, Charlotte,
Brilliant.
this is the kind of conundrum, isn't it? I mean, I like that Oscars.
I would have liked that kid to be a little bit more assertive
I like
instead of
it
being
too.
so polite.
And good on you for being so involved, because I think that we were having this conversation about the failure of institutions, and good on you for being so proactive and finding a community. So that's amazing. However, my hatred for social media runs so deep. It's really hard for people, I think, to imagine a world where social media exists, but it's not with the current social media giants. The current social media giants have done nothing. They've done nothing to protect you and nothing to protect grown adults. It has led to polarisation and to literally young people suiciding, and they haven't cared. Bo Burnham, who's a brilliant brain, he's an actor, he said recently that we used to colonise land. That was the way countries got rich. You would invade a country and you would steal their resources. And now our brain and our attention is being colonised. That is the capital that they are going after, and they are publicly listed companies, and they will never stop. Growth is all they want, and they don't care about anyone's health. What we can do is get an innovative Australian company to come through and create a platform where young people can be, and I don't want any young people that have found a great community online, I don't want them to lose that community. I'm so pro-community. But I'm just saying, we don't have to accept that it is this or nothing.
Is she talking about Telegram?
Can I just conceptualise this whole debate around the whole under-16s issue? And I said this on the last show last week. Is there a problem? Are kids' minds being, completely turned to mush? Absolutely. A good friend of mine, Damien Costas, he said, Joel, if you looked at the data on this, it's very troubling. We are literally witnessing in real time de-evolution of the brain and what's going on. This is a genuine problem. However, the parents have failed. The government is coming in on the coattails of this genuine issue, and they are going to usher in a digital ID. That's the problem we've got. And this is the thing. We need parents to, one, be more active in politics so that this thing doesn't pass, but two, and probably more importantly, take care of your kids. Don't leave it to the government. And look, it sucks that, the cost of living is so high now, which has happened sort of over time, that in order to buy a house and to pay for groceries, that you need two parents out in the workforce to pay for 1, 2, 3, 4 kids. But the problem is we've got to get away from giving our government and turning to them to solve our problems. Because instead what's going to happen is they're going to give you safety, but you're going to give them control. And that's where this digital ID thing's going to come in. And that's the crux of the problem. Genuine problem, but the solution that's going to come in is going to bring in something far worse. And that is the really troubling thing about this whole topic. If you guys want more on that in terms of going into the science of that, I can get Damien on or someone else on to talk about this topic. But this is really what's going on here. And the worst part about all this is if they shut down social media, our indoctrination source, which is basically just hearing another side of the narrative, like from me or Rogan or someone else in alternative media, that will be shut down. Nigel Farage will be shut down, which had a huge effect in the UK election on young people. But the Department of Education will keep pushing their crap on the back of your taxpayer funding, and they will go unopposed. That's the problem. That's the big problem I see. But yeah, there is a genuine issue with regards to the algorithms here.
The government is almost never the solution. The government is always the problem. So does this need to be addressed? Yeah, I read this meme, I think it was, years ago, and it said that one of the most terrible, pernicious things that we've done to our youth is that we've stolen their boredom. And I was like, and then it went on to explain that previous generations, the kids got bored. They'd go out, they'd create a game, they'd go and play with each other, they'd come up with something. I grew up in semi-rural Western Australia, and, my friends would ride their bikes over, You know, it'd be 20 minutes on the bike, you know, that we'd go and explore and, you know, take tadpoles out of the creek and stuff like that. The kids don't do that anymore. So, yeah, of course it's a problem. You know, parents are overworked. And the really sad thing about that is you've got parents that come home and they're stressed and they're tired. And the people that they care about the most, their children only ever get to see a very tired, stressed out person. They get to see their parents pretty much at their worst. Their parents' best energy is spent while they're at work. So, you know, I would say to people, if you want to buy a house, do you need to live in the city? Go out to the country where you actually get to know the baker.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Go out to the country where you can actually, you know, go to the butcher shop and buy stuff, where you've got that country feel. It's not for everybody. I understand that. I get it. But what we're doing is we're creating such a high stress environment. And when it comes to the education system, we know that some of the big publishers have been lobbied, and so they won't publish certain books or certain stuff that's right-leaning. So what you end up with is even those kids that get offline, and then they start reading books, is the books are going to slant them in a direction that they may not have realised. So it's causing all sorts of structural problems, I think, with our society. But that's why, as much as I say individual rights are important, the primary unit that creates society, creates harmony in society, that needs to be looked after, is the family unit. That's what we should be prioritising, and we're not.
Absolutely. Let's get back to it, guys.
The really...
So I think if I had my way, Oscar, I would ban social media for everyone under 16, except for you.
But then you have to talk to old people.
You are the exception. Look, I am very, very worried that it is a dopamine hit for developing brains, that the rise of mental illness in parallel with the rise of social media is... I can't prove causation, but it really worries me. I totally agree with Claire. It's unenforceable. An 8-year-old's going to get around this with a VPN and set up a Facebook with their age. We all know that. But I actually think such as the anxiety of parents, and my son-in-law and his wife with 3 kids just said, I don't care if our kids hate us, they're not going to have social media to 16. They felt, this is last year they were saying this to me because they've just seen the damage. I personally feel that saying it's unenforceable is not a good enough reason. Having a conversation and saying we're doing it. Look, we have laws against burglary. We still have lots of burglaries. We still have lots of murders, though we have laws. Lots of laws are unenforceable. Speeding. But I do think giving parents who are profoundly anxious, with good reason, opportunity to have the conversation. But you're the exception, Oscar.
Yeah. Can I just say something? This guy is an anti-gambling advocate. I know. How is it that him and perhaps the panel, you know, he's making the point, look, how can you govern this? But him and the panel are very much making the point, this should pretty much come in. Sure, it might not be governable and whatever, but how is it you're expecting kids to do what fully fledged, mentally developed adults can't do, which is get off the pokies, for example? I mean, we've all seen the images of these lines of pokies machines, these old people sort of getting that, what did he say, dopamine hit? But you want these underdeveloped kids to actually also try and shut it off and just immediately turn it off. Like, I think there was a real opportunity there for him to make the point that he's in the anti-gambling sort of movement and lobbying.
He didn't mention it.
He didn't mention it.
Specifically, it's about pokies. Can I just say something that actually is completely irrelevant? Right, sorry. Sorry to everybody.
Monday night with Shaq.
I just have to point this out. It just struck me the way he framed something. He said, my son-in-law and his wife. Well, his wife would be your daughter, wouldn't it? Like, why didn't he say my daughter and... Is it just me? Did that not sound like a really strange way to phrase it?
I don't know. I'm not from that generation. I'm not from that.
But who would refer to their own child as my son-in-law's
And
wife.
his wife.
Do you think that's weird, guys, in the comments?
Is it just, am I the
I've
weirdo?
no
It just seemed like a weird way to say something.
Look, I was born yesterday, so I mean, I'll listen. I'll listen to my audience if they say, you're wrong on this. One person wrote in the chat, "I'm done with this crap. Good night, everyone." Anyway, I'll keep playing.
You keep watching. You got some more brain cells, please.
I'll get to your comments soon,
The Prime
guys.
Minister even used the comparison with alcohol laws. I mean, you're underage, you're not meant to drink, but that doesn't mean no one underage has ever drunk, right? Have you not seen some of these events? So, John, we're having this big conversation, as you can see, in our country to ban social media for under 16s.
And I know this conversation's beginning in America too. A book's recently come out, The Anxious Generation, I think, which is calling for a similar kind of ban. I got to say, look, I despise social media with the same venom that you do, I'm happy to say. I don't think banning is the right answer. And let me say something positive. It's reaching for little tiny nuggets of positivity amidst all the negativity. But I was talking to somebody the other day who said that their 12-year-old kid is much more savvy about social media than their older siblings. Because when it comes to quote-unquote cancel culture, I think what the young were doing was creating a set of rules that were impossible to live up to. They were creating a kind of draconian rule for it. And their younger siblings were coming along and thinking, we don't want this. We don't want to be walking around like in a minefield. If we say something slightly wrong, we're going to get destroyed for it. We don't want this. And I suppose that's my long-winded way of saying that I hope and think that as we grow up with social media, young people are going to become wiser and more savvy. They're going to readapt.
But the whole Charlotte's point that it is so addictive and that it's a growth strategy, we're expecting a lot of them to just kind of rise above this crazy addictive thing, right?
Yeah, a ban's never going to work. Yeah. There's no way it's going to work. But but what I'm saying is, I rather hope and think that as we grow up with social media, when I wrote my book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, which is all about just how terrible social media was, I had this line in it where I said that we were on Twitter, we were like toddlers crawling towards a gun. Now we're like teenagers walking towards a gun. I think, as we get older and as we get more used to it, I hope that our relationship with social media is going to get slightly less dysfunctional.
Just on the concept of the bans are never going to work, we all think the bans won't work because we're seeing it through the prism of everyone having an iPhone. And iPhones we can't regulate because they're owned by Apple. But an example of hardware is like the pinwheel phone. That does. If people stop buying iPhones for their teens and start buying them things like pinwheels, which is restricted, they can't get around that.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point.
You wouldn't see a teenager throw Australia, mate. Australia, mate.
Come to my house.
In 40 years.
Come to my house. Our next question comes from Afra Basha.
As a young 19-year-old Liberal woman in today's political climate, I increasingly find myself to be one of the few young women in the Liberal Party. Some have attributed the lack of like-minded Conservative women to the growing subscription to woke leftist ideologies and the loss of traditional Conservative values. However, it is important to note that misogyny also plays a part in pushing women further away from the party. What can we do to encourage more women to join the Liberal Party and see them in positions of power?
Well, Charlotte, this is...
I don't accept that premise. I love you, young lady, but I don't accept that premise. In New South Wales, they didn't do pre-selections for so many seats. 13 of these seats, they picked 13 women to run, 12 of which lost. They overrode the membership vote. They never held a members' vote, and they picked 13 women, and they lost. It's not about us not liking women. It's that we don't like, incompetence. That's not to say women are incompetent. Let me give an example of a good female senator who wasn't pre-selected. Concetta Fierravanti-Wells, senator for the Liberal Party. This is a factional game. This isn't a female game. And she was not pre-selected. In fact, she was put on an unwinnable position on the New South Wales Senate ticket because she was in the wrong faction. She was a Conservative. She was someone that voted for Pauline Hanson's anti-jab bill back in 2021.
This is heresy. You can't do that.
Exactly. Yeah. But what people are doing, and I don't blame this young girl for this. There's a lot of people that should know better that have put this out there. What they're doing is there's a lot of females in the Liberal Party. They're using the woman card in, not her, a lot of the higher echelons of it to get one up on some of their candidates that they perhaps may not be able to beat on competence or numbers or winning members' votes for pre-selection in these seats. So they play the woman card if they can, or they play the diversity card if they can. For example, we don't have enough Lebos in the party or Indians in the party or whatever. Take your pick, Aboriginals. And that helps them to escalate their ability to move up rather than do more for the community, get more votes and whatever. Is there misogyny? Of course, there's always misogyny in every single party. Is there racism? Absolutely. Look at all the last Labor leaders in the Labor Party. They're all white, but this is the problem. What we're seeing here is a factional battle between the moderates, between the left-wingers, and between the Conservatives and the Liberal Party. It's a lot more nuanced than the Liberals have a woman problem. They don't have a woman problem. There's a factional problem. They can't even pre-select their own candidates. Even today, we are months out from an election, and they still haven't pre-selected candidates in New South Wales for key seats because there's a factional battle going on right now. That's what that is.
So, Joel, you know a lot more about politics, especially Australian politics, than just about anyone I've ever met. Oh. I think with that young lady there, look, I wouldn't have picked her for being 19. I think she looks and sounds like a 12-year-old personally. Right. The reason I say that is I think somebody like her is going to have a difficult time being taken seriously, right? Because of her age and inexperience. That is not a conspiracy against her. Just like when I was, a junior broker, right? And I'd brazenly walk in and talk to these, really wealthy people and try to get multi-million-dollar investments off them. It was never going to happen because they didn't take me seriously because I was too young and I was too inexperienced. The problem is that people like her, very smart, are told that the reason she's not getting ahead. I'm guessing here. I don't know this woman.
Yeah, clearly. That's what she's
probably being told that it's because of misogyny. It's because of sexism. It's because of racism. So when you tell somebody that, and they struggle to get ahead, or they see somebody else that perhaps comes from a wealthier family where the doors were opened a little bit easier, they can assume that actually the problem isn't something that I've done, it's just because of the colour of my skin or my gender or whatever. And that's some of the damage that gets done to a lot of young people because they don't realise that maybe right now the opportunity wasn't available to you, but it will be available to you in 2 years, or it will be available to you in 5 years.
That's right.
Right? So because she does look so young, I would assume that in a lot of jobs, depending on what she's trying to do, she would have a difficulty in getting people to take her seriously because she looks very young. She's sort of timid. She's got a timid voice. And I'm just going to repeat myself. And so she's going to get a false sense of what's actually happening.
Well, let me give her what she wants. And what we all want is equality of opportunity. So when you join the Liberal Party, when you join the Labor Party, when you join the Greens or a minor party, what we want out of our democracy is an ability to have the same ability to fund your campaign as pretty much anyone else would, which is why Australia is one of the few countries that has taxpayer-funded elections. You want to have the ability to be a member of the party, do as much time as anyone else would have to. Maybe you've got to do a year or two of volunteering. You've got to be a member for 2 years before you get voting rights. You have to campaign within the party. So, people know you. You're part of the machine of the party. You put some blood, sweat and tears into the party to building it up. You do your years. Maybe you run in a few seats that aren't winnable. But the point is, it's equality of opportunity. And if you have that, you can't complain. That's not what's happening right now. That is not what's happening right now. It's a factional thing where these moderates within the party, they're really left-wingers within the Liberal Party. They have stacked the Liberal Party. They are not allowing Conservatives in. They're not allowing Christians in. We saw this in South Australia. When Alex Antic tried to get hundreds of people into the Liberal Party establishment tried to keep them out. But unfortunately, there was too many people trying to join Alex Antic. He flooded it with members in the Liberal Party. However, in Victoria, in New South Wales, in Queensland, new members that are trying to sign up, people that perhaps watch this show or watch other shows, they're not letting them in. They're cross-examining them. They're looking at their Facebook. Oh, you liked one post from Joel or this person or that person. You follow this page or that page. No, you're not allowed in. That is what people are being succumbed to. So going back to the woman issue, yes, we should have equality of opportunity. You should have the ability to join the Liberal Party. You're young, you're 19, you should do a couple years before you get voting rights. You should volunteer in a bunch of campaigns, cut your teeth on how to hand out a how to vote card, build something outside of politics, actually run a business, do a bit of charity work outside the Liberal Party, you know, and slowly apply to become a candidate at an election. I think the first election Peter Dutton ran in, it was an unwinnable seat, and he did a very good job in it. He was 19, actually, when he was pre-selected in that unwinnable seat. He did his time. He did a few more elections. Eventually, he won a seat. He did his time. He did his time as the Minister for Home Affairs, and eventually he was trusted by the party to be the leader of the opposition. There was a build-up. Now, if anyone is denied that from doing similar things, then we've got a problem. Now, that problem doesn't exist in the Liberals with regards to going after women. That doesn't exist. Is there a bit of a boys' club? Yes, but that's because the establishment of the people, it's about who they know and trust and whatever. Does that mean women have to go above and beyond to be completely blemishless in the Liberal Party? More than men? Maybe. But the ability for women to be pre-selected, it's not zero. In fact, what's happening is where in the Liberal Party right now, they've overcorrected. They're pre-selecting women that don't have the support of the members of the party in these areas. And they're sending these women in to lose. And they go in and they lose because they haven't built that time. They haven't done their time and actually built the party up, you know, built the name and brand recognition in these areas. And they get set up to lose. How is that helping them? It reminds me of affirmative action in America, when affirmative action, it gets these black people that have no ability to actually keep up with people in Harvard, these top-tier universities, when they'd flourish in a Tier 2 university. No, you know, affirmative action puts them in a Tier 1 university, sets them up to fail, and then they collapse all the way down to the bottom, and they just drop out.
And that's the problem with quotas. You know, race, gender, you know, whatever. When you've got quotas like that, you do set people up to fail. But as you said, the Liberal Party overcorrected, but they're not trying to find the best women. And look, some of the Teals, whilst I don't agree with a lot of the things that they say, some of those Teals should be Liberals. There should be Liberal women in those seats. So, you know, I think there's certainly a problem, but the other side, the Labor Party and left-leaning parties around the world tend to say, well, because you're a woman, we're going to put you into this spot. Yeah. And they put them in places that they can't lose in.
Mate, we got some cracker comments. Sorry to cut you off. One person said, so how do we manage this situation with this issue when you've got, this is what the person said, so to put this out to the Brain Trust, how do single parents manage this with shared custody with regards to kids and social media and everything?
Oh, well, I don't think it, this ban, I think it's ridiculous, and I don't think it's going to work. And let's be honest, most shared custody, one parent will do, I won't say most, but a lot of the time, one parent will allow the kid to do what the other parent won't let them do. Right? You see that all the time. You don't want your kid to play PlayStation all night. Your kid goes to the other parent's house, they play PlayStation all night. I mean, I just don't see how you'd ever enforce this. But the other thing to remember here is some of the damage that'd be done by you cutting off communication between your child and other people, extended family members and things like that. Right? You're going to cut them off. You know, I don't get this. And again, was there community support for this in the first place? I mean, if there was, I'll stand corrected. But I don't think government was asked to create a ban. I mean, parents should already have the ability to control their children with parental controls on the devices if that's what they want to do. But kids aren't going to want them to, so you're going to enforce it by a ban? It just...
Honestly, I think that the government should be taking a lot of these things to the election. They should... When you go to vote, yeah, you have your how to vote card ready to go and you vote for the lower house candidate, you vote for the upper house candidate, but there should be a whole separate sheet and there should be like 10 things on it. 10 things.
Like
10
they do in the United States with ballot initiatives, right?
They're brilliant ballot initiatives. Like, do you think cannabis should be legalized in California? That sort of thing, like what they do. But you should have like 10 different questions on different things. Do you think, and look, maybe they're not constitutionally binding. Maybe some constitutionally binding, maybe some are plebiscites that are indicators. But whatever it is, we should have more direct democracy, not less. And because when you get less, you get the misinformation bill just losing. It should be losing by 70%. I guarantee you, if you put that to a vote, we would win by 60 to 70%.
I reckon it'd be high. I reckon it'd be 90% of Australians. But you know what, Joel? The reason that they're not doing it is because they don't want to. Because the reality is, The Voice, when it first was proposed, actually had the majority of Australians supporting it until the details became very hazy. People weren't sure exactly what was going to happen. There were some real concerns that were brought up. And basically those concerns, nobody even attempted to affray the concerns. What they just did was said, oh, you're racist, you're dinosaurs and dickheads, or whatever Ray Barton said. Like, they just, called everybody names and then wondered why people turned against them, right? What's happened since then? The only place in Australia that voted for The Voice was the ACT. Every other state and territory voted against it. Now you've got the Labor premiers around the country trying to introduce a treaty at state level. Why? What part of no didn't you get? The misinformation bill. Let's just pick a figure, 70%. If 70% of Australians don't like this and don't want it, they don't care whether you want it or not. They don't want the public to actually, I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist here, they don't want the public to have a say because the public's going to tell them very clearly, I can't swear on this, to go away, right?
Let's be honest, how would an Aussie speak? Get stuffed.
Yeah, I was going to say something else. Sure. But we don't want them to do this. Yeah. So what they're doing is they're doing it through the back door. When did the Labor Party, coming up to the last election, ever, I mean, maybe they did and I missed it, did they ever say that their platform they were running on was to introduce a misinformation bill? Was that something they were discussing?
Maybe it was in the manifesto, but it was never talked about publicly. I don't remember it being public. But
there just isn't the public support for it. So I agree with you that we should be able to have things like a ballot initiative or a mini referendum or non-binding plebiscite or whatever. So at very least, the politicians can get some feedback about what the Australian people want.
Yeah.
And the Australian people don't feel like they're alone, because otherwise you walk around going, am I the crazy person or does everyone else agree with me? We should have that.
And in terms of the mechanics of how government would work, it would be a lot more efficient, because often what we have is a debate over, we won and we won on a mandate of this, and then the other side saying, no, you won on this, not that, and whatever. Whereas if you have a clear vote, this is the percentage of this, and this. It may not be a constitutionally binding vote, maybe a plebiscite, but maybe it is a constitutionally binding vote and you do give them information and they can look at it. I just think that I
guess the question there, Joel, would be because we would say if it's a major change to how our country is going to operate, then it should be something that's voted on. But who's going to determine what a major change is? When John Howard
citizen-initiated referendums, that's what it's called, sorry.
Yeah.
So you can citizen-initiated it.
When John Howard ran on the GST, he actually ran on the GST. There was no secret that he was going to introduce a GST. It was the platform he ran on. John Hewson was unable to get it through. John Howard won, and he got it through. So do you need to have a referendum in those sort of circumstances? Probably not. But things like the misinformation bill or The Voice or anything like that, we should be asked whether or not we want to spend. How much did they spend? 400, 500 million or something on The Voice?
It was $500 million.
Like, we should be asked, is that something that you want to see our tax dollars spent on?
It was $500 million from the Electoral Commission, and it was like 100 million for the yes side and a 40 million for the no side.
Yeah.
And it's like, you could have built like a town in the Northern Territory. Like, you could have done so much.
So here we have people saying that, what we want to do is help parents by passing rules that restrict access for young people to use social media. Why don't you pass some rules that help parents with the cost of living? Why don't you pass some rules that help parents get a few more hours a day off work so they can spend time with their kids? Why don't you pass some rules that actually give the kids something to do? Because you don't want your kids out and about because of how dangerous things have become, So why don't you pass rules that actually give kids something to actually aim for? But we're not doing that.
We're not. I'm shocked by how many people are watching live. This is awesome. I think it's over 1,000 now across the platforms. It's almost 100 just on Rumble, which is not it's one of my smaller. It's only like 1,000 followers on Rumble, so 10% of them are on. Whereas Facebook, it's like 130,000 followers on Facebook, but the turnout's terrible because of censorship. That's why I'm trying to get you guys on a Rumble if you guys are on other platforms. We should finish this Q&A thing. But you can see we're very passionate about this because it's social media, and tech amplifies evil.
Yeah, if I have a chance to whinge about government, I'll never
never toss it up. Here we go.
Basically, what you do.
Yes. Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and I never shy away from our issues as a party. But I will say that I can see improvements, and I know that, in the media, people might not want to be too generous to us, but we are trying, and we are starting to see results in that. And in one of the ways that, Hilma's network is trying to contribute to that is about 8 weeks ago now, we launched our own podcast. It's not one of the crazy ones, don't worry. And it profiles our female Liberal candidates ahead of the next election. And that is one of the ways. I don't think it's also, just to bang on about social media again, having these super digestible bite-sized politicians. We actually need longer forms ways to get to know our politicians. And that is one of the ways we are proactively trying to create something that brings it to people wherever they're at, whether you're walking your dog, commuting to work, or,
I really like
So,
that.
Afra, I want to bring you back in. So you joined the Liberal Party, but you're
Remember,
saying
the question
you
was,
feel a little out.
The question was about how
misogyny.
Misogyny.
Yeah.
And the actual statement, the girl started her statement was saying, I'm all against, wokeism and stuff like this.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's going on is the Liberal Party getting dragged further left.
Yeah. Yeah, they're just trying to drag it left anyway. I was going to say there's one person... what's it called? One person said that I love this man. I'm talking about you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I told you. We're building a cult following for you. Yeah, this is, again, I don't have their name, but it's called Miss Smiley B. So it could be a dude, but I'm assuming it's a lovely older lady.
I'd like to remind our 19-year-old Liberal Party lady who actually gave women the vote in this country. I'll give you a hint. It wasn't Labor.
I thought you were going to say, I'll give you a hint, it wasn't women.
No, that's not what I meant. No, but it was the Liberal Party that that gave women the vote in this country.
Yeah. Yeah, let's go back to it, guys.
Outnumbered, I'm guessing.
Yes, that's true.
What do you think would work to bring more women like you in?
I think an honest conversation with women speaking to women, I think would be better, because I feel like women just understand how other women think, rather than just a man speaking to them and mansplaining things.
Right. There's a bit of mansplaining going on, is there?
A little.
Well,
So can men have...
So my whole
make-
rant before was mansplaining the whole thing about, well, this is how the dynamics of the party work with the different factions. And if I explain that to you, I'm mansplaining.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, this is literally how politics is done. In Labor, it's not 3 factions, it's 22. So you'll get more mansplaining in the Labor side.
90% of the teachers in my primary school were women.
Yeah.
And I got quite offended by that, Joel, because I did identify for a brief period of time there as a woman.
Yeah.
And I felt very...
You did too. You actually
I can't
did.
even keep it straight.
No, you actually did. You did resonate. You played the devil's advocate. Well, like Joel. God help us. Oh, God. Oh, my gosh. Now, I was going to say, I forgot to say it before. A lot of these things with men wouldn't feel so dispossessed if we didn't have so many. If they had more male role models in their life through teachers. Like my school, I was very lucky. I had the opportunity to have many male role models at the school, not just a great father and uncles and whatever, but also great role models at the school. I think it was something unheard of. It was 60 to 70% of the teachers were men. Unheard of, because it was a private school. And they paid top dollar because they knew that all boys school, you need men to be there to provide that role model sort of role.
And you need to have a little bit of rough and tumble with boys, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Boys and girls are just different. We just are.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But this, I'm sorry, look, I don't want to friendly fire at, our own party, but what is this nonsense? Oh, the men are out there mansplaining. Really? What are women doing? What? You're coming at us all the time about toxic masculinity and, men are doing this and men are doing that. Men are driving too aggressively and men are dominating the sports. So what's the difference? The member for Sydney, right? I was at the train, believe it or not, I actually caught a train once.
Right. I believe it.
I'm at Sydney train station and, the central train station. And I know this sounds just stupid and it doesn't matter. But there I am, and I noticed that there were there were female bathrooms there, and there was no male bathrooms. So I said to the thing, I said, well, about equality, where's the male bathrooms? And they go, oh, you got to go all the way out and all the way down to basically outside the train station to the other section. I'm like, well, how come they've got 4 women's bathrooms and there's no men's bathrooms? Yeah. Now, look, I don't care about this. This is not something I'm passionate about. Yeah. But if you're going to get in my face about bathroom equality, right, then I'm going to say something about it. This is why I'm not free. That's why I had to leave Australia.
This is hilarious, mate. Woman's plate. What the hell are they doing? That's a good point. Again, and just for everyone listening online, as a statistic, this is a critical statistic. For the people listening online thinking, oh, I'm not one of those podcasters, this podcast, 65% are women that watch this. 65% are women that watch this. It's not like a young men sort of, frat party sort of thing.
And women are fed up with it as well, and women aren't happy with their sons going through this. Women who have sons, I talk to mothers all the time, and they go, like, we're really, really worried about like how our sons are supposed to navigate through this world. Yeah. And just lastly on this women's-splaining thing, so Kamala Harris, she went into a barber shop. I know I said it on the show. You don't see... look, if Donald Trump went to Ella Bache and said, oh, look, I'm just going to torture you girls as you get your legs waxed, right? the women are going to say, listen, mate, piss off, right? Why is Kamala Harris in a barber shop? Come on, if there's a male-dominated space, it's that. Get out, right? Yeah. But they just want to be... No, I've said enough.
No, it's all right, man. Guys, leave your comments. Leave the comments in the Rumble.
Yeah, maybe don't leave.
We're almost done. We're almost done. I know you love Shaq. Show him some love.
Make myself available to have a very honest conversation with you, and I will not sugarcoat it because there are still systemic issues that we are facing as a party. But I can promise you, I'm trying really hard.
Sorry, can someone tell me which party she's in?
I thought she said she was a Liberal.
Did she say she was a Liberal?
I thought that's what she said.
Yeah, okay. I think she was referring to the little kid as in our party thing.
Okay, yeah. All right. Actually, no, you're right. You're right, 100%.
And there are other women who are too. And I really feel like that connective energy is starting to actually pay off. We are speaking out about it. We are finding our voice. And I genuinely am sorry if it, hasn't been a good experience for you, or if it hasn't been as evolved as it should be by now. But yeah, I would love you to come to a Hilmer's event next time. There's one in Melbourne.
Okay, no recruiting on stage.
I feel bad for that kid. That's
Claire,
mental illness.
We're seeing a lot of political polarisation that's gendered as well, aren't we? Women have been drifting to the left and men to the right. That's partly part of the story,
well,
I'm guessing, with recruitment too.
Yeah, it could be. I think the Liberal Party can do two things. It can treat women who are already among its ranks a bit better. I see Moira Deming in the audience. She's been treated absolutely horribly by the Victorian Liberal Party.
Moira. Love Moira.
So the second thing the Liberal Party can do is just have better ideas. The biggest issue with the Liberal Party is not gender, it's generational. There's a lack of young people. The number one issue in this country is housing. The Liberal Party needs to make sure that young people can buy houses so they can start families. If young people can't buy houses and start families, then they won't become conservative. So young people become more conservative.
Become conservatives.
Yeah,
once they
maybe
have
they
something
need to look
to
at things like the
conserve,
Marriage
if you
Act
don't have anything to conserve,
and the family laws in this
why would
country.
you ever become a conservative, right?
That's critical. Critical.
There has to be a vision. I don't see the current Liberal Party speaking to young people about this issue. It seems to be a party for baby boomers, really. And once the Liberal Party has better ideas and they can speak to younger people, I think we'll get more women on board.
Well, Claire has shouted you out, Moira Deming, and so I now have to bring you in because blame Claire. You are a member of the Parliament in Victoria, for those who don't know, and you are, you've been in a kind of ongoing legal battle with your leader. But in terms of the Liberal Party, do you think it's a welcoming place for women?
You basically called her associating with Nazis, just to refresh your memory. Just a slight legal battle.
Absolutely. The members have been fantastic. The federals have been fantastic. And there are lots of people inside that have been fantastic.
And are you going to make a federal tilt? I've heard rumours.
I'm sure you've heard all kinds of rumours.
Just that one.
Well done.
I am where I am, and I'm happy where I am. Obviously, I don't want to be on the crossbench.
Yeah. What do you make of Afra's commentary?
Oh, I'd love her to touch base with me outside of this public arena.
Outside of the ABC?
Look, all political parties have this kind of thing going on. I think it's about power. I think gender is an excuse. I think there are a lot of excuses made for people just trying to hold on to power. I don't think there is always narcissism going on in politicians, but I have seen some, I'll admit.
That's right. You
All right,
didn't hear from
Moira.
me, you
And
heard
we've got
from
a
Moira
final
Deemy,
question
who was
tonight
kicked out.
from Claudia
and she's a woman.
Hamel.
Given that the majority of Australians want a full ban on gambling advertising, what does the delay say about the power of the media and their political influence in this country?
Where did that number come from? The majority
I thought it might be me.
There you go. Go on. Tell us why gambling should be banned and how it's addictive. And tell us and completely go back on what you said about kids. Let's hear what you've got to say, Tim Costello.
Power of vested interest is extraordinary. The truth is that not only do we have the greatest gambling losses and greatest gambling harm, gambling losses per capita, but when it comes to sports betting, we have the greatest gambling losses in the world in sports betting as well. 4 times the losses of the UK, John. 1 million ads on free-to-air TV. It took a Victorian Labor woman who sadly lost her battle with cancer, Peter Murphy, to call it out. The last attempt to actually get reform, gambling reform from a Labor leader was another Victorian, Julia Gillard. And I'm saying this because one of the reasons we can't get reform is New South Wales Labor is particularly captured by the vested interests. New South Wales has 35% of all the world's pokies in pubs and clubs. 35%. New South Wales Labor has Labor pokies. Randwick and then down the Canberra Club, 30 million in pokies revenue a year, $130 million of assets. No Democratic Party in the world except New South Wales Labor has pokies interest. So there's a profound conflict of interest. And I know that when Gillard tried to reform as Prime Minister, it was New South Wales Labor members who defeated her reform. That was a cashless card on pokies. So we're in this situation where really, with a Prime Minister from New South Wales and the Minister leading this reform from New South Wales, we're up against a profound capture. They should divest of their gambling interests. And they should then say to vested interests, 72% of the public want it. I was at the Nine AGM. Nine's opening statement was, Australia lives at Nine. Since 1956, Australia lives and loves Nine. My first question was, if Australia lives at Nine, when 72% of Australians want a full betting ad, gambling ad ban, why don't you get on board? Oh, well, you know, it's profit. It's even worse with Seven and Kerry Stokes, who owns the only paper in Western Australia with all their AFL ads. So it's powerful vested interests that are still grooming our kids. We'll get a partial ban, but as Steve Kinane, who works with PK, has shown, that won't be in evenings when 7 out of 10 of the ads are being shown and kids are watching family-friendly programs. And I finished with Stuart Kenny. He founded Paddy Power, owner of Sportsbet. He said, if you want to protect kids, you have to have a full ad ban. If you want to protect wealthy bookies, you have a partial ban. Sadly, I think Albo's going to go with that.
Can I say, I don't see a bill listed, and it's the final 2 weeks of Parliament, Tim Costello. Isn't there meant to be a bill?
Absolutely. We were promised, it's over 19 months, and literally there are members of the Labor caucus, very principled members. Mike Freelander, who's a New South Wales Labor MP, has really been brave and has stood up for it. I don't think they want to bring it to caucus because they know there's going to be pushback because it's the right thing to do. I think the ban on under 16s and social media, which I've told you I support, is weird when you actually can do something about banning gambling ads and you won't.
Yeah. Well...
There you go, he finally said it for you. There you go. We got there. We got there.
All we have have time for thank you to our panel, John Ronson, Charlotte Mortlock, Tim Costello and Claire Lehman.
What's
and
next
earlier,
week?
Independent MP Zoe Daniel joined us from Parliament House in Canberra.
She checked out when the gambling thing came up? I'm joking. I want to hear what they got on next week.
I'll be with you from Sydney for our final Q&A of the year with the panel that will include former Australian diplomat and specialist on China, Jeff Raby, and professor at the ANU's National Security College, George Brandis. Head to our website to register to be in the audience in Sydney. Thanks for sharing your...
What do you reckon, guys? Should I go? No, I'm joking. Well, that was interesting. And I do just want to say a huge shout out to everyone that was listening online. Before I forget, if you guys, and we are going to chat very briefly before we go away, but if you guys haven't got a map yet, we've sold 50 of these maps. There's only 200 of them. The election's coming up. If you want to get a hold of a map, email me at joel@thearkpodcast.com. I'm only doing 150 left of these maps. They show you, these are the MAGA maps. They basically show you the last election results overlaid with the referendum results. It shows you where the majority of our freedom people lie around this country, and anyone that's interested in politics, getting your head around it, if you want to understand where the MAGA sort of movement is in Australia, this map is for you. It's in a really nice matte finish, and I'm delivering them to you. They're going for $95 each, just so you guys know exactly how much. There's not a lot of profit in each one, but I've gone to great expense to make sure that you guys are getting the best quality product. So please email me at joel@thearkpodcast.com. And how was your first viewing, Shakeel, on Q&A in a while?
I other than that, what was his name? John.
Let's call him the Weasel.
Tampon John.
Tampon Jones.
Tampon
Jones.
that British guy. Other than him, I thought that was a pretty good. To be honest with you, I thought that was pretty good. They exchanged their ideas pretty well.
Yeah. That was a good
That
panel.
was a good panel.
I thought it was a very balanced panel. I thought every member, there was no member I was cheering on rah, rah, rah the whole time. I thought there was actually quite a lot of nuance, surprisingly. In the past, it was like the previous panel 2 weeks ago, it was completely stacked. Anti-Trump in terms of the audience and the panel.
But I'm not actually sure why that British guy was even there, because he didn't seem to have anything to add or have any experience in the topics that were actually being discussed.
Right.
He should have been on a different panel.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure that he'd fit in quite well on some other show, but just not that particular episode. But there's a couple of things I just wanted to bring up. They talked about climate change for a bit and the cost. I don't know where she got this insurance premium thing, but they talked about the cost of living. And one of the things that they said was that emissions are declining in Western countries, such as Australia and the United States, which is true. And emissions are increasing in countries like China, which is also true. However, China and India are still developing countries. Their emissions are going to have to go up. That's first. Secondly, when we buy panels that are manufactured by them, what we're essentially doing is we're exporting our emissions to them. The same thing with iron ore. If we bring iron ore out of the ground and ship it to them and then buy the steel back off them, we haven't done anything for the environment. All we did was export our emissions. I think that the centre-right parties of the world have got to do something here. We've allowed the left to dominate this issue. And the way to do that is to talk about what things we can do realistically, whether that be nuclear or my favourites, which is geothermal and hydropower. Let's look into those things. We can look at things like tidal barges. From what I understand, trying to use tidal barges and tidal turbines to take advantage of the tides in the ocean is very complicated and costly. But let's look into it. Let's see what can be done. And then let's make a case on economics saying this is the cheapest way to produce the power. This is how we're going to fix the problem. But at the moment, it's been largely ignored by the right. I think the right have got to deal with it. As long as we don't, we're coming up with ridiculous ideas. Offshore wind farms, things like that. It just makes no sense.
No, it's a complete clown show. But what did you think about the insurance aspect? I mean, she was saying that insurance companies are freaking out about climate change. What are your thoughts on that?
What is she talking about? I have no idea what she's even talking about.
And you're from the industry.
Because
so you ought to know.
Well, she's talking about her insurance, right? So, firstly, what is it that she's insuring? Because what are the main insurances people have? They have health insurance, car insurance, building contents insurance, life insurance. So, like, what out of those things are going to be affected by climate change? And also, if your house insurance policy is going up, like, climate change is going to take an awful long time for that to affect you. What is she talking about? I don't get it. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And also, I won't say most, but it's standard practice that the insurance companies will take on a certain amount of risk and then they reinsure the risk. So if you've got a customer base of 100,000 customers that all have similar insurance, but you don't want to have some sort of black swan event that affects you, you can get reinsurance over the 100,000 as a block. So these reinsurance companies might have multiple blocks like that around the world. So they're often able to do that much more cost effectively. Again, what is she talking? I have no idea what she's talking about. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But they blame everything on climate change.
Yeah.
Yeah, fuel prices have gone up. Well, they haven't. They've gone down. But fuel prices have gone up. Oh, it's climate change.
Yeah.
We have bushfires. Nothing to do with us not backburning like we were supposed to. No, it was climate change.
You know what it reminds me of, and I don't agree with this stream of thinking, but you know when atheists, they attack Christians and say, you know, it's the God of the gaps. Whenever there's something you can't explain, you say, oh, well, it's the divinity of God and whatever. And I believe that. I believe that God, you know, he is a divine being and they can't comprehend things. But it's got the idea of that God of the gaps is your answer to everything. With regards to climate change, everything relates to climate change. Everything. You know, why the dogs aren't, you know, crapping more or why this or that is happening. And it's like, it's all climate change's fault. It's like the devil. And therefore we need to subsidise companies and give it to taxpayer money and kill our economy so that we can fund organisations that we have stocks in so that we can make money. And it's like whoa.
As Donald Trump would say.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bobby. I love my oil, Bobby.
Yeah, sorry, Bobby.
if
Bobby's
they
not gone near the oil.
Actually held these views, sincerely held these views, like AOC saying that the world's going to end in 12 years, and things like that. And look, whatever number you put on, 20 years, 30 years, whatever arbitrary number you want to put on this, if you sincerely believe that, you wouldn't switch to electric cars, would you? You wouldn't go and build solar farms and wind farms because the payback time, so the amount of time that it would take to save the amount of energy that was used to produce those items in the first place is about 25 to 30 years. So if you think genuinely that the world's going to end in 20 years or 25 years, you wouldn't do any of this. You certainly wouldn't be buying new cars. What you would do is you would restrict everybody and say you can't purchase anything. Just keep what you've got right now, even if it's a lead-based, fuel-heavy car from the 50s. Keep that, because that would cost the environment less than scrapping the car and building a new one. So clearly they're lying to us. Look, there is a future in renewable energy. I think most people, which is why I don't understand where the left is coming from on this, most people care about the planet. You don't sit down with Christian conservatives and the Christian conservatives go, you know, I really want to see our planet perish. Nobody does that, right? Christians want the country to look, and the world to look beautiful, to be clean, so they can leave something for their children, their grandchildren, etc. Everybody cares about this issue. This is not a left-right issue. And I think probably something I've learned from you is if you actually have a look at all of the core issues, there really isn't a difference between left and right anymore. There really isn't. The main things that most of us care about, we all agree on. We all agree on. We can argue about what the right tax rate should be or, you know, that sort of stuff. But there isn't really anybody on the other side of this issue when it comes to gender. There isn't anybody on the other side of the issue when it comes to looking after the planet. We're being realistic that we want to, you know, we have to use oil and fossil fuels for a period of time, but we would like to be able to do things in a cleaner way. There's no counter argument to that I've heard with any sincerity from anybody. Even the oil companies are on board. What can they do? So I think that it really, the good thing about populism is it really is an us versus them. And it's about us trying to take control back of the narrative, trying to take control back of our countries and our policies, and telling government, you better start responding to what we want. Because it's ridiculous if you've got people with disabilities in Victoria who have more in common with somebody who is a rural farmer who votes for the Nationals because they want the same thing. They want government to function properly but not be too heavily involved in their lives.
Yep.
Who these politicians are representing is basically nobody.
No, exactly. And can I just encourage everyone that people are watching these streams. The ABC's Q&A has 148,000 subscribers on their YouTube, and they got 1,500 viewers.
And they're not shadow banned.
And they're not shadow banned. In fact, if anything, they may even be throwing money behind in advertising. Again, this organisation receives, the ABC receives $1 billion of taxpayers' money every year.
They could have given it to Kamala.
They could have given it to Kamala. Now, if you look at, and she could use it to actually pay off her debt. If you actually look at the $1 billion, isn't that nuts? If you look at our views across the platforms, we've got over 10,000 views on all the platforms once we finish this stream. But I need your help. If you're able to support us, we are going into an election next year. These streams are expensive to make sure we keep getting it out there. So please hit the link in the description. Man, I'm getting so congested right now. It's getting really hard to get this sentence out. Like and subscribe and support the show. That's what I'm trying to say. But if you like these shows, if you like Mondays with Shaq, heck, I could call it that. I'm happy to do these shows every time. Sometimes they are really boring shows, like actually uninteresting shows, and it's not even worth doing. But I'll keep an eye out on what the topics are each time and try and endeavour to do them each week. But yeah, this has been fun, man.
Well, you brought something up, and I'm sure that your audience will totally agree with me on this one, right? You're talking about citizen-initiated referendums. If you've got 10 times the viewers of the ABC, you reckon we should get the Australian taxpayer to give us $1 billion? I'll split it with you. Because I reckon there's got to be something for all of us.
I'll tell you what.
I reckon we would run. I honestly reckon. Like, I'm not a professional. You are. I reckon that people running podcasts and just, you know, and not a professional setup like this. There's people that jump on YouTube on their phone in their kitchen, like Mark Dice. This is like on his phone in his kitchen, right? And he gets more viewers than CNN. So, you know, these people run media much better.
Yeah.
And they give their audience the conversations their audience wants.
Yeah. And by the way, just to put in perspective again, I mentioned earlier, like with everything they put out, you know, on the channel and everything, it'll probably be about 150 to 200,000 viewers. This podcast will get 1 million views. If I do all the clips that I usually do, if I have some time, in this next week, we can get 1 million views. And that's what's crazy about this whole thing. It's a friend of mine, Dougal Cameron, he actually said a while ago, he said, what do you mean it's $1 billion every year for the taxpayer? Here's a better idea. How about we have one YouTuber every hour on the ABC? You pay them each $1 million a year, and that's it. You know, and you could do it. You could do a very high quality podcast with audience interaction and everything. It would do very well. But no, this is why the ABC is such a cesspit of leftism. It's because it wouldn't survive in the capitalistic sort of world like that. And so,
legacy media altogether is dying. But what's happening with the SBS these days? Does SBS still exist?
I think they also get $1 billion as well.
They get the same as the ABC, do they?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'll have to check that, but I do believe so. So yeah, man. And look, this is the thing. There's a case for it to be used to be in rural areas, but what's happening is in the inner cities, it's becoming a cesspit of crap, as we can see on this show. But anyway,
who's watching it in the inner cities? Like seriously, who's watching those shows?
Just the activist class.
Exactly. We'll
yeah,
get them
the politicians trying to get the vibe of, you know, the audience and where the electorate's at. But it's skewed. It's skewed. I can stack a audience full of people of my audience, and a leftist can be made to feel like they're alone. I can do that. but it's not going to be helpful because it's going to be like this. I'm not going to be properly hearing from one side of the argument. That's why I don't do it. I know better than probably most people that, you know, I don't want to be wrong a minute longer than I have to be. And if I have one eye covered, I will be wrong for a very long time. And I won't realise why I keep getting hit on the right side of my head.
I think it was quite big of Cenk Uygur to go on the PPD broadcast.
Oh, yeah. Huge respect. Honestly, mad respect.
A lot of respect for him. And look, he is a fighter. I don't agree with him politically. But he is a fighter. He's passionate about what he stands up for. And he's never been, to my knowledge, he's never been one to shy away from getting into an argument or going on stage when it's a hostile audience. So, yeah, I respect that. Absolutely respect that. But you're right. You don't want to have, especially when they're people who are not as confident, shall we say, as someone like Cenk Uygur.
Yes.
You don't want to have somebody who wants to present an idea and they're just being shut down. You know, I've heard people that will say to me that they believe in an inheritance tax. Now, that is one of the taxes that I think is the most disgusting and horrible taxes that they can have as an inheritance tax. That's my personal view. But if somebody wanted to have a tax debate with me, I'd be very, very happy to do that. And I don't think that you should have an audience that's going to shut that person down. Let's have a proper conversation about it. If it's an issue that people want to know about, you can't do that if you're only siding with your own side.
Yeah.
And I noticed that with the election is that there's been these meltdowns from, you know, liberal media saying that they don't understand what went wrong.
Yeah.
Well, you're not paying attention. And then I've got friends in America that will say to me, oh, look, you know, I'm not subscribing to this and I'm not watching that show anymore. I'm like, how can you be surprised then if you won't listen to anything that you don't agree with?
Yeah. Yeah, it's honestly nuts. Guys, I've got a few people saying in the comments some funny things. One person said SPS sold out years ago. One person wrote, I'd post a super chat if you actually read it. You can do a super chat where you pay some money, and that supports the show, so please do. They're putting mRNA jabs in your food. Okay, trying to get me banned on this platform, YouTube. Thanks. God loves you all, will save all. Hell concept, and the word is mistranslation based on 4 different words. Okay, all right, see. All right, come on, guys. You got to do better on these comments. I don't understand what you're saying.
Oh, the Instagram comments were fire.
They were fire, were they?
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, I want those Instagram people over on Rumble because they actually stay. The comments actually stay on Rumble, guys. One person said Medicare now is not paying for nothing. Enough many. Someone wrote blue beam. I don't know what that means. Public liberty under corporate laws. Yep. Someone had a cracker comment before where they said it was like a staged question.
I just want to address that thing about Medicare while you try to find that comment.
Yeah.
Again, this is something that I think pretty much all Australians, regardless of their political persuasion, agrees that healthcare costs are spiralling out of control and healthcare quality is declining. Right? Again, that's not a left-wing, right-wing issue. I can go to the most, you know, Labor, you know, inner city places or Greens places, and I'm going to find people that are going to agree with me, and I can go to rural Australia and the farmers are going to agree that this is a problem. Again, the overwhelming majority of Australians agree on this issue regardless of their political persuasion. Nothing's being done about it. And we need to do something about it.
Yeah, someone wrote like cue the planned question and then cue the planned response. It was, and sometimes that happens. I mean, the question about money in politics, getting money in politics in Australia, that I very much felt like that was a planned question that was put in there, which I'd understand because they're bringing out legislation soon about that, and they see this show as setting the agenda for Canberra, believe it or not. And yeah,
you'd probably kind of have to vet the questions first anyway, wouldn't you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, certainly that the host knows the name of the person who's going to ask the question because they called them by name.
But what questions make it in?
Exactly. Yeah. So they probably get the audience to say, okay, what questions do you want to ask? And then they go to that person. But to be fair, and I'll play devil's advocate here in defence of the ABC, of all things that I'm going to defend.
Yeah.
But what are they going to do on a show like that? Because you don't want them to ask some random question that's not really related to the topics that they wanted to talk about.
Yeah. No, obviously. I think Yeah. No, I obviously think that more people need to be, engaging with the show. If they want the Q&A to be a bit more right-wing, then you need to engage with the show, show up to the shows. There have been some great ones in the past.
Shout out to Oscar.
Oscar?
The little kid.
Oh, the kid, yeah, the kid. That kid was brilliant. The school kid that was like...
I like that kid.
I reckon the internet is a wild place. Sometimes you'll find a bear behind a tree. And I was like, that was very wise.
I like that
and it was
kid.
poetic.
I would have preferred him to be just a little bit more
assertive,
aggressive, like I was when I was
12.
running around.
Saying, no, screw them. I'm definitely going to use... It's like, well, jail him. Jail him, Albo.
What I argued about when I was in high school, which, now that I'm 40, nobody cares. I don't care. But I still stand by what I said back when I was 14. Why is it that young people, when they work, have to pay taxes at the same marginal rates of tax as adults would pay, but yet they're allowed to be paid less than adults?
Yep.
When they jump on a flight, they've got to pay the adult fare, so when it comes time to them being paid, they get paid less. But when it gets time for them to pay, they've got to pay the full freight. How's that fair? Especially if they don't get given a vote. Now, okay, not a huge issue for most adults. Nobody's going to care about this. Big issue to me. So I wrote a huge thing about this, got it published in the school newsletter amongst over the protests of everybody who worked at the school, and then I sent it to the Sydney Morning Herald, and they never published it. They should have. Sydney Morning Herald.
We got a question. One person wrote, is it of note that the unions will not have limitations on their contributions to the ALP? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we mentioned this at the time. It is very much going to favour the Labor Party with the unions, and with the Liberal Party, they're going to have their own ways around contributions and dinners. You can pay $15,000 to have a dinner with Peter Dutton, for example, and it's counted as fundraising. Sort of thing.
What about the Chambers of Commerce and Business Councils and things like that? They presumably wouldn't have the limits. Yeah. But you know what? The thing with the unions, and look, this is clear when you have a look at the United States. Yeah. The unions are not necessarily anymore representing the views of the people who are members of the union. I mean, I don't think that every member of every union all thinks and feels the same way about every issue. That just wouldn't happen. Yeah. So I think that the power of the unions will diminish, partially because of the success of the unions. Yep. Because as unions have created better working conditions, higher wages, etc., people are less reliant on the unions to stand up for them.
Yep.
Now, I don't want to see the unions disappear, but I do think we have to be very careful at making sure that unions don't have too much power to the point that it destroys businesses or hurts corporations. There has to be a balancing act, and that really applies across the board with everything, I think.
Yeah, Rami? Were you going to ask her?
I was just going to say, how are they going to, if I have a kid and he wants to access his social media, and then I'll just open an account with my digital ID, how are they going to stop that?
But why would you need a digital ID anyway? You would just say you live in another country.
Right, yeah.
You just use a VPN and you live in another country, wouldn't you?
That's how they're going to ban the VPN, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Look,
okay, they banned the VPN, then you just use a remote desktop. Look, I'm a technophobe. I don't know what I'm talking about, but you use a virtual computer and host it in the cloud or whatever.
We got another question about the Q&A vetting questions that are too conservative / right wing question mark. So they're asking me, do you really think they do that? Absolutely. I mean, during COVID, we saw a massive barrier to entry for a lot of questions, even questions I don't even know which will nuke this particular stream, but they did actually censor that, but they can't be really taken off TV. But also, I mean, I could think of a lot of questions off the top of my head which I don't think would pass their pub test. They'd opt for someone else with a more watered-down question. For example, I would get up and ask the question, why is it that the government is going after misinformation? It just appears to be a blatant attack and a revenge on people that voted no to The Voice. Why is it the government is trying to dictate to people and tell them what to think rather than, and look, maybe that might be like, oh, look, that's more of a statement. But it's clearly what's happened because Albo made the point after the election that he would have, had a much better of succeeding, but there was a lot of misinformation. That's what he said in his failure speech, concession speech. And so I don't know, I look at these things and I don't trust the ABC. They've got a lot of trust building to build again, and the ratings say that. It's not my opinion. The ratings say that. It used to be a great show.
It says, it speaks volumes that Albo would prefer to pass a misinformation bill rather than taking ownership and saying, you know what, we dropped the ball. We had the majority of people saying that they wanted to deal with this issue. We had broad-based support. We flitted it away, and it's my fault. I'm the Prime Minister. I'm the one that decided to do it this way, and it didn't work, and it's my fault. If he thinks there was too much misinformation, he could have gotten out there and campaigned a lot better. He could have gotten out there and actually, and so too could some of the Voice people, had gone out there and really explained what was going on. But the bottom line is, we didn't even know what it was going to look like because they said they'd legislate it later. I mean, Australians expressed deep concern. This could have been addressed. And it should have been addressed. Right?
Absolutely.
And if I can just go back to John Howard again for a moment with the GST. Now, he was you're probably a little bit too young to remember all of this, but he had all sorts of difficulties, and Paul Keating was just smacking him around, and the Labor Party was smacking him around on, well, if I go to a bakery and I get a cake, is that the cream isn't going to have GST, but this is going to have it was a mess, right? But John Howard and Peter Costello, that's Tim Costello, that's the brother, they actually managed to convince the Australian electorate, and they got it passed, and they won the election, they got it passed. So, this is a failure of the Labor Party. And look, I have nothing against Albo as a person, right? I've never met the man. He might be a lovely man. I can't imagine it, but he might be a lovely man. But I do know people that have met him that have said that he's quite a nice bloke. I've got no question about that, but this was a failure of his. Don't take it out on Australians.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to say, we do have to wrap this stream up relatively soon, but a few more questions from people. That person that said, do you really think they're vetting these questions? They've actually come back. This is Cava1. There's no names in this. Cava1, they said, I know they do. I know they vet the questions and they don't let conservative right-wing questions through. They said, I sent in several questions and they were not used. So there you go. There you have it straight from the horse's mouth. She said the ABC, he said, it's probably a she, statistically speaking. The ABC should be divided into rural and regional news programs and urban news programs. The urban could run by paid subscription with only rural and regional subsidised by the Aussie taxpayer. That's actually a great idea.
And then those shows like Four Corners, Landline. Is that the other one? The ABC does produce, or used to produce, actually some reasonable content. But my expectation, and maybe I'm just naive, but I really would have thought that the ABC should have been a politically neutral network, and it's not.
No,
I think that's what Australians object to the most.
It's very much not. Another person wrote, and I'll just fire through these quickly because there's a few more left. Please keep in mind all Q&A that can be viewed can also be used against policy topics, just like they used student input implementing VCE during COVID periods. One person wrote, reason for voting, ? The normies always choose poorly, and I'm fed up looking for policies that most parties don't even post on their site. Kind regards and God bless. Thank you for your $1 donation. And I read it out. You didn't think I was going to read it out, but I read it out. So thank you very much for your $1 donation. 94 more dollars and I'll shoot you a map.
That point there that was made, I think that is a really salient point. Who's got the time to read through all of the policy positions of the major political parties and the smaller parties and then do an assessment on each individual issue to work out what makes sense and what doesn't? Nobody does.
No.
And this is why what the majority of people do is they go down and they go, tick one for Liberals or tick one for Labor or one for the Greens or one for whoever, and just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Because it's too hard. So, I mean, hopefully we are seeing more people taking a more active interest. And I think the change is going to come not necessarily actually from policy. I think the change is going to come by having more politicians who are independent or who do represent smaller political parties that actually have enough influence. You know, people like Pauline Hanson, I'm not trying to be a shill for her, but I think Australia is better off with a Pauline Hanson in our parliament.
I totally agree.
Right.
No, I think she's definitely a lot more real and she's authentic. So this is why we do our policy matrix on the in election. So this is what we did for the New South Wales election. It shows you the party policies on the left side. It shows you what they stand for in ethics, energy, environment, public health and well-being, education, economics, and democracy, like free speech and all of that. And it shows you where all the parties stack. And as you can see on the top, if we can just blow that up a bit larger, we've got the Freedom parties here in New South Wales in our last election. How similar they were to each other and why they perhaps should be in one party and not four parties, for example. But also with the major parties, how far they fall short of the mark. So you don't have time to read the manifestos of these parties and look at their track record. We do that. We put it in one simple graphic. I'm so impressed with what you guys do in elections. You actually go out. Yeah, I'm doing the hand signals of that guy now. Yeah, it's like there's too many masculine men out there. I was like, okay, go.
That toxic masculinity.
Oh boy, journalist. Anyway,
that policy matrix. I remember when you first showed that to me, and I was horrified. I had no idea that the majors were that similar.
Yeah.
And I did have a question for you about that. Somebody asked me, which was based on the questions being asked. Is there a possibility that the questions were slanted in such a way as to show the similarities between those parties, but there is actually other parts where those parties are majorly different?
No, you should just read the questions because the questions are black and white. And I'm not interested in deceiving people. I really am not. You know, if you actually look at the questions and how they were asked, for example, they're pretty black and white. Will you act to remove the abortion birth legislation? It's black and white. Will you revoke it or not? Do you support net zero or do you not? Like, do you support net zero emission targets or do you not? But basically, it's very black and white. And so when you go through these things with the parties, they will send you the answers. Now, there's a truth thing here. If they send me answers back that they think are the answers I want to hear, my researchers, they will actually look back at their record, look back at their manifesto that their parties voted on, because the Liberal and Labor, they vote on the manifesto, and so do the Greens, and it actually compares them to their history. And what it very much shows is this is what it comes up with. And so when I look at these things and I go back to them and I say, hey, why did you tell me that you support, freedom of speech? You're pushing the misinformation bill. It's a very clear track record they can go back to, and they hate me. They hate my guts because what it is it's bringing transparency to the political process. And this is just one of 6 tools we roll out at the election. Someone asked something about transparency before. We also do these things where you type in your address and it brings up your Member of Parliament's voting record. So you can see how they've voted in your interests or not in your interests. What political corruption they've been up to outside the parliament. Have they been giving grants to people that also donated to their campaign? You know, did you run over a bike rider, in Victoria, for example, and try to cover it up? These are the sorts of things that I put in here. I'm looking to add more features like the expenditure of these members, like how much money has Adam Bant spent on flights, on private jets, but he wants you to have a net zero sort of, you got to eat less meat. This is the sort of stuff that I'm making. It's not cheap, but
as if that would even make a difference. If we all switch to vegan food, where they're going to get the fertilizers from?
Oh, don't get me started. Don't get me started.
But
I saw something. I think it was today. Bill Gates wants to insert metal rods into cows or something to stop them from farting.
Oh,
that can't be real.
It's real.
No.
Shakeel is not.
No, I gotta fact check that. No way.
The cow's going to be backed up.
Yeah,
raping
but
cows.
I do want to say, because some of the people that are tuning in at the moment are probably people that are new. What do we say if we're very worried about the future of Australia? We're concerned about the government being focused on the wrong things. Okay, we get out there, we vote for minor parties, and then preference the big guys after that. What is the real differences that a voter can make that's going to make that voter feel as though they're actually doing something that's going to enhance their lives.
Wouldn't it be nicer if they built an app just like, MyGov ID or whatever, but, dedicated to just like educating, their voter base, all these little things like...
I really don't think that they want to educate the voters. The voters.
No, they don't. They don't, and that's why they benefit from the system. And so, the whole preference voting system is intentionally convoluted, and that's the point. That's why I try to simplify the complex with politics. If you support, for example, the vast majority of things on the left with the green things on that, then we do how to vote cards, which show people exactly how to vote in their specific area. It's a customized card so that if I was in your area and you said, Joel, I trust you, how would you vote in this area? We always put the freedom parties first. Then we put Labor and Liberal depending on where they are. And then we put the Greens and the Teals last.
Like, this is the sort of thing that, like, the government should be funding. You're doing their job.
Well, look, I personally think that all podcasters in Australia should do this. I do we were talking about Friendly Geordies earlier today, and we were having a laugh at some of his segments about Trump and Kevin Rudd.
And I like him. I don't agree with him, but I like him.
Me too. And I think Friendly Geordies should make his own how to vote cards for his audience to make the Labor Party and the Greens more honest. Because I think
you would run you've got the freedom parties.
Yeah.
So you could go to the other. I'm not sure what they call themselves, the locked up parties.
The lack of freedom. The totalitarian parties. Yeah,
you could like do a thing for them, like not you, they can do one for them and say, look.
Yeah, they should.
The Labor Party is giving us way too much freedom. Like here's a point of difference with the locked up parties, right? I don't know what they advocate for, so I don't know.
It's not even that. So the left...
You want more government control in your life, and this party advocates for more government control than the Labor Party does.
It's pretty much just socialism.
Yeah. Look, I think the left-wingers... See, Friendly Geordies, he's not a communist. He's quite actually in the centre. He's actually more of a Labor sort of voter, but I think he doesn't like the big tentacles of big money in politics. I think he genuinely does want to get results out of politics and bring greater transparency to it. And that's why I think he gets so much flack from the establishment. But the left have an anti-establishment, and that's what Friendly Geordies dwells in. And there's a lot of people like that in America that we see. People like, who would you say, Jimmy Dore. He was in the left-wing anti-establishment, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK.
But that's the whole thing, because people who are anti-establishment haven't really got a home on the left. So they've really found a commonality with the small government, limited government conservatives, right? But both, again, when it comes to things like social services, healthcare, education, infrastructure, all of those things, we all know that it needs to be paid for, and it has to be paid for by tax dollars.
Yeah.
So that commonality exists there. What people are looking at is, okay, what's the best way to achieve all of this? And I think the simple answer is we have limited government that's funded, and instead of having this massive bureaucracy running all of these things, just let the people have access to the money. If you want to give a direct subsidy to childcare, fine, do that. But then limit the exorbitant costs that childcare providers are going to be able to charge. It's the same thing with the NDIS. The NDIS in itself is a pretty good idea. What's not a good idea is to allow NDIS providers to rip off the most vulnerable people in our society who we as a country are trying to help by charging them, 3 times and 5 times the prices of these items.
Yeah.
Why not just let the people have a direct subsidy if you're going to do that, so they can shop from any provider? There's got to be better ways of doing it. I think government just makes a mess of it. And I think that is what people on the left, the anti-establishment left and the anti-establishment right, are complaining about. And personally, I think that that's actually the majority of people. I don't see many people, unless they're employed by the government, that actually go, actually, this is wonderful, I want more government. Nobody says that.
No, absolutely. It's almost 12 o'clock, guys. I'm going to read out some of these last chats on Rumble. And if you're listening on other platforms after the fact, come to Rumble next time. click the link in my bio. So I'll just quickly run through a ton of these, about 15 super chats. In passing this bill, they can and will modify information on all platforms, thus moulding the next generation. Absolutely. The ABC should be, yep, I've already read that one. John Howard banned guns and introduced GST along with the war in Iraq and war on terror and war on drugs. John was a terrible PM. Countdown.
I'm not a shill. If that was directed at me, I'm not a shill for John Howard. I was just referring to the GST.
That's right.
Bringing it in.
That's right. Yeah, that was what this one was recent. So I think he was just this person was just making a statement. Countdown was good. Never missed it during my misspent youth. Someone said, yes, I always tune into a Rage Retro Months. Damn, I miss the 80s.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Does Rage still exist? Is it still going?
I can't believe it still exists. Also, due to the diversity and aptitude of the Australian people, many don't understand the jargon and get lost without clarification. Absolutely. The person that sent us the $1 said it was $1 which is 2 AUD.
Not quite.
Yeah, not quite. It's like, what is it, 1.75 or something?
About 168, I think.
168. Of course.
Buy Bitcoin.
That's buy Bitcoin. That's right. The chart. And by the way, it's the crypto convention this weekend, which I will be going to in Sydney. The crypto convention is actually quite a big convention. There's a few thousand people that are going to it. And if you guys want a discount from the crypto convention, they have sent me a discount code, which is 20% off JJ20. JJ20, and you'll get a 20% discount to the crypto convention. I will see you there. I do believe it's at the Sydney Opera House or something. So that's going to be...
come talk myself.
Mate, I think it'd be great, especially when crypto's happening. And I am doing a podcast on Monday with Stormrake, who are a portfolio group that manage crypto portfolios, and they want to sponsor the show. And they want to talk a bit about crypto, so they'll be coming on Monday, which I'm really looking forward to. But guys, let me just quickly wrap up one last comment. One person left us $1. They said, I'm sick of woke censorship in all forms of pop culture and art. 8 years of this crap. Hope Elon can tariff gaming communities until they ditch BlackRock and ESG funding. Thoughts? Here's another $1 USD/2 AUD. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I have to get going. Shakeel's got to go. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, comment, share. If you love Shaq, let him know.
He loves.
He has a fragile ego, and he needs the support. He needs the encouragement to keep him warm at night. And so I will see you guys later. Thank you so much. I will be back on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Or later for a show. Thank you very much, and I'll see you all later. That was a lot of fun.